Yo, what's up guys, it's Talon. So this is a very different type of video than I normally do, but I got asked to coach an entire guild of people. They had sort of an event. Shy is the person, her guild. I don't actually know what it's called. I probably should have asked, but either way, it's a European guild of people, and they wanted me to coach them. There were probably about like 15 to 20 people ending up being in the call of me coaching. Basically what happened is I ended up going over a presentation, and then they mostly just asked questions. So I only really ended up presenting over the jungle and the Baron lane sort of thing, giving a little bit of an oversight, an overview of those roles. This is about like a 20 slide long thing, and if you guys want me to make a video going over the entire slide, just talking about basically all of the most important things of how roles work, mindset you should have towards climbing, objectives, basically just a lot of the most important parts of Wild Rift. Let me know if you want that video, but for now I have like a 2-hour long video. The first hour and 40-ish minutes is me answering a bunch of people's questions, and then the last part of the video is me coaching an Ezreal, who her guild, like, they did a giveaway. She was the one who won it, so we coached her. The Ezreal coaching was done at the beginning, but I thought that this part I would put in the beginning and then just put the Ezreal one at the end. It cuts out a few times because there are a few issues, but overall, yeah, that's the Ezreal one. And then this is me just answering a bunch of people's questions. So if you had any specific questions, a lot of people just asked whatever it was. So if you're curious about this stuff, you know, I know it's a bit of a different type of video and it's a 2-hour long video, but I think that this is pretty useful. And then again, if you guys want, let me know in the comments. I'll do that slideshow video in the future as well. But yeah, let's just get right into it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm going to stop in between each slide, and then in between each slide, I'll ask you guys if you have questions about what we talked about, and that type of thing. Start with the jungle. Okay, I mean, we can start jungle if you want, and then I'll go to Baron lane second. So yeah, I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you guys see it in a second. I just need to pull it up.
Okay. If you guys want to join the stage, you can do that now.
Like they can join the stage to talk and everything?
Yes, they can.
Cool.
Just because if you do type in chat, we may not see it necessarily.
Yeah, I think it would be easier if people just ask questions verbally. That's better. And then if people type, I can answer it that way too. Yeah, just let me know when you guys want me to start the presentation, then I'll wait till people join or whatever.
Yeah. We can start.
Okay. Then yeah, wait, do you see my screen right now? I want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. You like it? Okay. The person wanted me to start on jungle, so we'll start on jungle, okay. I guess. Basically I have like, I think two slides of jungle, and I'm just going to talk about these things. And again, I'll ask you guys if you have questions after I talk about the slide, but you can also just like talk and interrupt me. I don't really care. I'm just here to answer questions that you guys have, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm just going to start talking about like the types of champs and then what they basically do. So there's obviously tanks. There's like, and again, you could organize this in more ways. I just thought this is like the different types of way that you would play, like the different champs that have different play styles. There's tanks, there's obviously early game bruisers, early game assassins, and then like scaling and farming champs. And scaling and farming champs can be like tanks, bruisers, or assassins, but it's more like oftentimes AP champions. But there are like AD champions like Nyla that also fit into that category. So the main goal of tanks initially is, and again, I also want to quickly reiterate, I'm talking really fast, but I'm pretty sure I'm recording right now. I am recording, so if I talk too fast, you can watch it on a slower speed later. It'll be valuable. But the main goal of tanks is to facilitate teammates through pathing. So generally, the main goal with your pathing is to try to go towards whatever lane is the strongest and set that lane up. So initially, you're going to do this based on who you think is the strongest early game champion or who has the best lane to gank. So for example, Renekton's a really good early game champion. So you might want to path towards a Renekton if he's playing into a Kayle or any kind of like late game champion who he's going to stomp early. But you wouldn't really want to path towards a Renekton if he's playing into something like Garen or Ornn, because those champions are really hard to kill because they're so beefy. So then in that case, you might path towards your dual lane. Maybe your dual lane has something like Leona, or you know, some type of champion that can set you up, or that's good early game like Draven, and you'll play around that. So initially you're deciding who's the strongest, who can I play around, and then you also want to look into who has the best kind of gank setup. Gank setup basically means who has good ways to give you an easy time of killing the enemy when you go to their lane and gank them. So this could be through CC, crowd control. So a champion like Leona can stun people really easily. Renekton can dash and stun people. Whereas a champion like Kayle can't do jack shit. Like before level 5, don't gank your Kayle unless you're just trying to protect them. But generally, again, the main point of the initial thing is that the goal of a tank is to try to path towards your strong lane and set that lane up to the best of your ability. And in other cases, you might want to path towards your weak lane to protect them from a gank of the enemy. And this is where we get into a little higher level understanding, where it's like you understand that maybe you think your certain player is better, maybe you know the player, maybe you're duo with them, maybe you know that the enemy jungle is like a Volibear who really likes turret diving on level 5, and so you path in a way where when the Volibear is hitting level 5, you're going to be protecting your lane that's in danger. There's a lot of things that go into it, so again, if you have specific questions, you can ask me about that, but that's just the general thing. And then another really important thing for tanks is itemization. Typically, your itemization is going to be focused on the enemy carry or the enemy damage type. So if the enemy damage type, there's 2 types of damage, AD and AP. Attack damage, ability power, different items provide different types of damage. That's pretty basic. I think you guys probably understand that part. If the enemy obviously have too much of one or the other damage type, then you're going to want to build items with that type of resistance, armor or magic resistance. It's also important to note that when you're building, you need a mixture of HP and resistances because of how the math works out. You don't want to just build resistances, because if you just build resistances, you're going to be having such little HP that you're going to be really squishy anyway. So typically you want to build an HP item early on, like Heartsteel, or different HP items depending on the game. And then later on, as your second, third, fourth type of items, you're going to start building more resistances. In terms of itemization against specific enemy comps, there's champions that have specific things where items work really well. Common ones are like Frozen Heart works really well when they have a lot of auto-attacking carries like Vayne, Yone, Jax, this type of thing. Randuin's works well when they have a lot of crit, so if they have like a Yasuo plus a Nyla plus a Tristana, that type of thing. And then there's obviously items that really counter specific damage types, so like Kaenic Rockern's really good into AP, so is Force of Nature, and then obviously there's a lot of AD items. Well, there's also anti-heal. Thornmail provides anti-healing, so you're going to want to build that whenever the enemy have champions like, Aatrox, Soraka, whatever. Counter that. Pretty straightforward. Again, if you have specific questions on itemization, let me know. But that's the general thing. And then the last thing about tanks is that they want to create space in team fights. So the main way that you're going to do this is through kind of how we talked about in the Ezreal coaching, except from the tank's perspective, where you're going to put yourself in between your carries and the enemy carries. And then what you're keeping track of is, did the enemy carry use any type of mobility where they now are very susceptible to me going in on them? If they did, I'm going to go in on them. And then in the same thing, you're going to keep track of what spells are dangerous to your carries. And if the enemy try to go in on them, then you're going to try to, block the enemy from engaging, basically. So that's the first kind of thing. I don't know if I should ask if people have questions right now, or if I should wait till the end of the slide. If you guys have any questions, just speak up.
I had a question about itemization.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I played Thresh a lot last season, and I was against a lot of Kaisas. But when I play against Kaisa, she, of course, with her basic attacks and her items, she does a lot of magic damage on her basic attacks too. So, do I build like what's it called? Frozen Heart or?
In the Kaisa, so the problem with building Frozen Heart early on in the game is it has way too much armor and almost no HP. I think it might have no HP, or maybe it's 100, but either way, really low HP to the point that it's not very valuable. And Kaisa's also got a lot of damage based around abilities, and so in terms of the math of it, it's not going to be very valuable against Kaisa. Actually, if you go specifically, I've been ranked 1 Thresh multiple times, if you don't know. If you go to the website called wildriftguides.com, I actually wrote a full Thresh guide on its Royals website, and I wrote that, and I talk about all the build scenarios. So if you want to see like that, you could check that out. But to go into specifically how I would itemize against a Kaisa, let's just say they had normal team comp. The typical thing I would go into Kaisa, I would rush my armor boots, because early on in lane, she's going to have mostly damage based around auto attacking. Because if you don't know kind of how her damage works, early on in the game, her autos do mostly AD, but her passive does mostly AP. I think it might be all AP. I don't remember the exact numbers, but her passive is when she gets her 5th like auto onto you, it's gonna pop that thing, that shows up under your champion, and it's gonna going to do a bunch of magic damage. So you can avoid that by just paying attention to that. You're not going to take much magic damage early, so you rush armor boots. And then what you would build after that, you're going to build one of two items. You're going to build Warmogs if the enemy have more range and poke, and you're going to build Heartsteel if the enemy have more melee champions that you can easily auto attack and get Heartsteel on. And then after that, I would go for most of the time Mantle of the 12th Hour, because this gives you armor, magic resistance, and HP. So you're getting both of the resistances you need against Kai'Sa, and you're getting HP, and then that passive with the healing is going to keep you alive really well. And then once you go deeper into the game, say the enemy had more auto attackers, so say they had Yone as well, or Jax as well, then you could go for the Frozen Heart at that point in the game. And then say they had more AP champions, then I would go for Force of Nature. And so that would be the 3-item path that you would generally follow. And then if you needed anti-heal as well, you'd throw the anti-heal after your first item. You'd just grab the Bramble Vest component, and then you'd finish Thornmill as your 4th item. Does that make sense, or do you still have more questions about that?
Yeah, that was all. But can you go like the new magic resist item too, or? Yeah,
you could go Kainic Rockern instead of Force of Nature. I personally prefer Force of Nature because the movement speed makes it really easy to catch people out. But if you like Kainic Rockern, that's a great item as well. So it's fine.
Yeah, and when she goes invisible, like, can you go Dawn Shroud too for it, or?
I don't know if it reveals her, to be honest with you. I'm not knowledgeable about that. You can go Dawn Shroud in place of Mantle in general, though, if you prefer that extra, like, passive. It's more of a preference thing, so if you prefer that, that's fine, but I honestly don't know how that interaction works, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions about that? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next point. Okay, so I'm gonna assume there's none. The Bruiser goal, generally the goal of Bruisers is that they're very strong early on in fights, so we call this kind of skirmishes. Basically, a skirmish is when you're fighting early on in the game, kind of in the jungle, or in the river. And so the way that you're gonna create these early skirmishes is through getting onto a scuttle, oftentimes the same scuttle you think your enemy is gonna go for. So if you don't know where the enemy is going to start, they're probably starting on their red buff. That's just the general, consensus, or the red side of the map at least. And if you start on the red side of the map, you're going to end up on your blue side. And so the way that you can match this as a Bruiser is to start on your blue buff, because your blue buff's on the same side as their red buff. And so then you're going to match them. And if you clear efficiently, you're going to get towards their scuttle, and then you can create an early fight. You're going to want to do this anytime that the enemy jungle and laners are weaker early game compared to your champions. Your lane or your jungle, and then also the laners that are on the lane you're pathing towards. And then if you are, worried about losing the fight because maybe it's actually a Lee Sin on the enemy team and it's a Draven Thresh or whatever, then you path away from that. You path, you start on your red buff, you path away, that type of thing. And then there's specific things like, for example, Olaf, Zed are 2 champions who start blue buff, Lilia as well, because they need the mana early game for their clear. And so they're not always going to start red side. It's just if you don't know, then you can keep that in mind. I know this is a more like high level concept, but I'm just, we're going over a lot of things, so I thought I can still mention that. Bruisers also are usually really, really good at ganking. So the same pathing things we spoke about as a tank completely apply to Bruisers, and you can follow a very similar understanding to understand where you want to path towards when it comes to those champs. And then the main goal is to just keep the pace of the game going really, really fast. Basically, you clear your camps as soon as those camps spawn, and then you immediately look for fights, you look for ganks. You're trying to do a lot of shit. And then as soon as your camps come back up, you go right back towards your camps. Like, the main thing as jungle as a whole is that you need to understand when your camps are up, you need to farm them pretty much immediately. Unless there's like something really important, such as an objective. So it kind of is the same as, again, when I was coaching the Ezreal, how I spoke about how you need to get the lane pushed, and then you do other things. You can get the lane pushed, then you recall, then you ward, then you go fight. The exact same with jungle, except for camps. You get your camps, then you do all the other stuff that you could do. And this only really differs when there's an objective up, where then you're going to prioritize that objective over other things. But those are probably the main points of Bruisers as a whole. Does anyone have any specific questions on that, or not really?
I have one question.
Yeah.
I've noticed in many games that the objective is spawned, and the entire team avoids taking the objective. So when are the times that we shouldn't like come near it, and when are the times we should like claim it immediately?
Yeah. So the thing that you're going to look at for whether or not to go for an objective as a jungler, as well as a team, but as a jungler especially, right, who has more agency on the decision making, is the strength of your teammates. So you're going to click on the scoreboard, and then you're going to look, okay, my top laner compare their gold to the enemy top laner. My mid, compare their gold, etc. ADC support. Whoever is, you know, the best ahead of their teammate, you're usually going to go for that objective. So that's what, you know, when you're choosing between Herald or Dragon, you're going to go for the one who's stronger. So you kind of notice this similar thing where it's always as the jungle, you're going for your stronger lane. And then the other things that you have to look at is, are the lanes pushed? So again, as I mentioned, the game revolves around waves. You need to push your wave and then rotate and go to objectives, go to fight. So if you feel like your teammates as a jungler aren't helping you on the objective, you need to go push their lane first with them, which I know is going to piss them off. Trust me, I understand. People are going to flame you for it. Don't last hit the minion, but just go and like help push it so that they have the pressure to push the lane. And then once that lane is pushed, now they're going to be able to rotate towards you and go and help. So obviously, like, there's going to be some scenarios where your teammates just suck and they don't follow you, they don't listen, they don't do anything. And the reality is sometimes we can't control our teammates doing dumb stuff. But the way that you can try to push them in the right direction is by focusing on those waves so that those waves get pushed and then you get to go fight after. So if the wave's already pushed, you're probably good to go for the objective. And if your laner is stronger as well than the enemy, you're probably good to go for it. But if your laner's behind, if the lane, they're pushed under their turret, they're in a bad spot, you might just have to give up that objective. At the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. I have a slide later on objectives where we'll mention specific like understanding of what objectives really matter, what ones are okay to give up in what scenarios, that type of thing. But yeah, generally speaking, you can use your kind of pressure to go pressure a lane first, and then once you pressure that lane, you can go with your team to the objective. And if you end up losing the objective because the enemy were on it right away, that's okay. Does that make sense, or do you still have more questions about that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Any other specific questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
For example, I'm playing support, okay? So I start with my ADC, bot lane, etc. When should I leave the lane? And who am I going to go assist?
When should you leave lane as a support in Realm? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
So I have a slide that I was talking about support, so I'll just go to this for now. We'll go back to the jungle after. Specifically, roaming, there's a few things. So the first thing is roaming, and that's the first point on the slide if you guys don't see. Generally, roaming is something you want to most often do when the first objective is spawning, or roughly about at 4 minutes to 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Like the early lane, you're usually going to stick with your ADC, but then you're going to start roaming. And I'll give you a few different things on how you're going to decide whether or not to roam. So the first thing is...
Yeah.
So do you have an additional question, or do you want me to...
No. I'm following up with you. Go ahead.
Okay, just want to make sure. Sorry. So the first thing is similar to jungle, actually. Support's often kind of considered the second jungle. Is who is the strongest? You ask yourself who's the strongest, and then you play around that. So if your mid or top is really strong, then you want to create a lot of opportunities to go towards them. But if you're shit stomping lane and your ADC is doing really well, then you're going to be more likely to want to stick with them and play more around that dragon or that turret, or kind of play around them. So the first thing is who's strong, right? The second thing is you often want to do the same thing that your jungle's doing, because obviously your jungle's the one who can smite the objective, so you need to most likely do what they're doing. So if you see your jungle going towards Herald, then you're going to want to push the wave really quickly with your teammate and then go towards the objective. So in terms of deciding on whether or not to roam, you're looking for who's the strongest, and you're playing around that, and you're also trying to play with your jungle. Now, in terms of deciding whether or not it's going to be safe for your ADC, you have to look at a few factors as well. So the first thing is, if we already pushed the wave, our ADC is going to be safe, because the enemy cannot dive or pressure our ADC if there's no wave to do so, because they can't tank the turret by themselves. The second thing is to look at the enemy champions and your champion. So typically an ADC that's good at surviving on their own is one with good wave clear and high range. So a champion like Varus, Ezreal, Xayah, because she has her ultimate, those types of champs are really good by themselves. But a champion like Draven or Vayne with suboptimal wave clear and low range is going to really struggle by themselves. So you're going to prefer to leave the champions alone who are good by themselves compared to those who are not good by themselves. And then finally, you're going to look at the enemy laners. So typically tank supports are really good at diving and also high range burst damage ADCs. So champions like Lucian Alistar or Draven Thresh, they're going to dive your ADC if you leave them for too long. But a champion like Vayne Yuumi, Kai'Sa Lulu, these types of champions, while still able to dive, are going to have a much harder time. So those are overall all kind of the factors. I know that I said a lot there, and at the end of the day, it's really hard to give you one specific answer because there's so many unique scenarios. So those are the main things to look at.
But talking about that, about the warden, since for example they are going to die, so about the warden situation for a support, where should I like put my ward? You know,
Where should you
for
ward?
yes, as a support, like for example before I start roaming, or to be safe, you know, as a support, I'm very like for example playing an enchanter or something, I'm very vulnerable, you know. So
Yeah.
where should I put my ward clear? You know, to assist the team as well.
Yeah, so there's a few main things to do with wards. So the first thing is, again, timing of wards before talking about where to ward. So timing of wards, the time you want to ward is typically after you've pushed a lane. Because if you haven't pushed a lane and then you go to ward, then your teammate's not going to be able to follow up because he's too busy clearing the wave. And so then you're going to be in a lot of danger. So that's the first thing. Make sure the waves are pushing forward before you go for a deeper ward. And if you are like really needing the ward, but you're in danger, like or the wave's not pushing, then you're just going to ward whatever's convenient, like whatever close bush or river or whatever. Now, in terms of the best places to ward, the absolute best place to ward 95% of times is a jungle camp. Because if you're able to ward a jungle camp, you get so much information. Like, let's say I'm level 3, I just pushed the wave, and then I go and ward the enemy blue buff. Now, if the enemy blue buff is not there, at level 3, let's say at 1 minute, do you know where the enemy jungle would be? Like, I'm asking you the question. What camp would the enemy jungle currently be on if their blue buff is already gone at 1 minute and you warded that?
It might either went to my red buff if my team, if my jungle didn't take it, you know, it's not warded there. Or he went to the blue buff, the other side. One of the two options, maybe.
Yeah. So
no.
If they did go to the enemy blue buff, to your blue buff after clearing their own blue buff, they're a psychopath. I'm gonna be honest, that'd be pretty crazy. It's possible, but that'd be really hard. What's up?
Because
Sorry, it was a little hard to hear you.
I mean, if he took the blue buff, he went to my jungle red buff, you know, because sometimes the jungle, when he clears his wave, his you know, his river, his side, the jungle goes to my side, you know what I mean?
This would be a very uncommon scenario that they would invade you at level 3. Like that's what we called it when the enemy jungle goes to our jungle. That's called an invade, right? And so then they're taking our jungle camps. That's going to be very rare. It may happen, but that's not what we would typically understand. So I'll just explain. Okay. Typically what would happen if they'd cleared the blue buff really early is that they would now be going to their red buff, into their red side of the map, which is one of the answers you gave. You gave 2 answers, and that was one of them. You said that they would be there. And so that's correct. They would typically, at this point, be on the Raptors, which are the one right by the blue buff. And then they would do, or right by the red buff, rather. And so typically that's where they would be. The point of this is, if you ward early game and you ward the jungle camp and it's not there, then you know they've already cleared that side. They're going to go to the other side, and you're safe for a while because they're not going to be there. But let's say that blue buff is still alive, then you know the enemy jungle is going to come there soon, and then you can keep in mind, once you see him on the blue buff, he'll gank you soon.
You will keep him in mind, and if you know that he's not there, he's in the other side, you will be free. You will free like to ambush the view lane. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
To play more safe, more more clear mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Of course, yeah.
For this.
Any other specific questions? Otherwise, we'll just go back to the jungle stuff. Okay. So yeah, again, if you just interrupt me whenever you guys want, because I'm just happy again to answer whatever questions. So you can stop me even in the middle of me talking. Don't feel like weird about that. But we'll just go now to early game assassins next. So typically, the main goal is just get a big gold lead and just be very selfish. Like it's a pretty straightforward type of champion to play. The main difficulty in assassins is being really mechanically proficient, because a lot of them are hard, like Zed, for example. Like these champs are a little difficult. But the main goal is just to farm really efficiently. So typically, you clear whatever side of the map you started on, whether it's red or blue, then you go towards the other side. So let's say you started red. Now you're going to go clear your blue side. Once you've cleared your blue side, now you can go look and see if Scuttle's up. There's going to be one of two things. Either Scuttle is alive, and then you're going to take Scuttle, or Scuttle's not alive. If Scuttle's not alive, you're just going to recall, and then you're going to spend your gold. Because usually early game assassins, they like building attack damage boots like Gluttonous Greaves or Boots of Dynamism, and that's a major power spike for them. So you're happy to recall after your first full clear. And then after you've done that first full clear, you're going to go back to the side you started on, maybe look for a quick gank before your camps respawn, and then as soon as your camps respawn, you go right back to farming, then you go farm your blue side, and then you can set up for the next objective or look for a quick gank before the objective. And so that's the very straightforward, streamlined way that an assassin is going to play the early game. And then later on in the game, of course, similar to how I was saying the ADC needs to be patient, wait out for the key spells, and then go in, an assassin does the exact same things, except what they're paying close attention to is the enemy carries spells. Like, let's say it's an Ezreal with stasis and exhaust and flash. We have to wait for Ezreal to use some of those things. Like maybe we wait for him to stasis or third ability or flash or whatever. And then we see those things go out, and now we can go on to him. But if we go on to him when he has all those things, he's going to kite us, he's going to destroy us and whatever. So that's really the main thing about assassins. Are there any specific questions about assassins or like that playstyle or anything like that? Okay, so we'll just go on to scaling champs. Again, pretty much the same as how I spoke about early game assassins, so we're not going to go too deep into that. In terms of the efficiency, the same type of clear, everything like that. The only difference with scaling champions versus early game assassins is you're going to do what I would call avoidant pathing, which, again, notice how when I was saying the goal of the tanks was to facilitate the teammates through good pathing by pathing towards your strong laner. The difference with the scaling champ is you're pathing away from the enemy danger rather than pathing towards your strength. So if there's, say, a volley bear early game, you want to go away from that volley so that you can just get your gold. You don't really care super much about your teammates. You just care about getting that gold under yourself, being selfish, and then hitting your power spikes. And then once you hit those power spikes, then you can start to fight. So even when it comes to first objective, you're often going to go for Herald, but you're just going to go for whatever the enemy's not going for a majority of the time, which usually still comes down to who's stronger on your team. You're usually going to play around who's stronger on your team, but ideally you're just getting a free objective and you trade with the enemy. And then usually after you trade with the enemy, if they spend too much time on that side of the map, you have an invade angle to invade the side of the map they're not on. So there's that type of thing as well. But that's generally, again, scaling champs. Any specific questions on scaling champs or anything that we spoke about in regards to jungle or anything specific right now? Okay, so then we'll just go on to the other jungle point, then we'll go back to Baron lane. So main things about jungle, these are, again, I kind of spoke about them all, so I'm not going to talk about them deeply. I just want to have these as notes. And I'll also link this presentation for you guys later. Just remind me to do that later. But efficiency is key, so the farming thing that we spoke about before, you got to make sure you're farming your camps as they respawn, similar to how the waves really matter for laners. You should clear each side of your map twice before the first objective. I described that scenario where you go red, blue, maybe look for a quick gank, then recall. Then you go red side, maybe gank, then go back blue side, and by that time the objective is spawned. Something I didn't mention that I think is extremely important, might be one of the most important things in all of Wild Rift that most people don't understand, is that the second dragon is the best time to come back in all of Wild Rift. Because most people, when they're losing a game, they'll contest the second dragon, and then they'll die because they're behind, and then they get so far behind that they can't possibly win the game. Usually what you want to do when the second dragon is about 30 seconds before it's respawning is to go on the opposite side of the second dragon, only if you're behind, to be clear. If you're ahead, just take the dragon. But if you're behind, then you go on the opposite side of wherever the dragon is spawning. You start pushing the side wave, you farm all your camps on that side, and now you just try to get those turrets on that side of the map. So like, let's say there's a gold bounty on the turret on the top side as the dragon spawning on the bot side. You push that, you play with your top laner to try to get the top side turret, and you get that additional gold. You can invade the enemy, and usually what ends up happening is you end up swinging the gold in a roughly like 1,000 to 3,000 gold. So say you were behind 5,000 gold, but then you get that additional 1,000 gold. Now you're down 4,000 gold. And the reason this really matters is because let's say that you went and fought when you're down 5,000 gold. You're probably going to lose. You're going to go down like 7,000 or 8,000 gold. But if you go there, you go from down 5,000 to 4,000. And the later the game goes, the less a gold lead matters, because in terms of the math of it, and this is getting a bit like into like the weeds of things, but in terms of the math, obviously, if you have 20,000 gold as a team and the enemy has like 15,000 gold, well then being ahead that much is you're ahead like 25% more gold wise. But let's say you're ahead 5,000 gold when you have 40k gold and they have 35k gold. Now you're only ahead, I think like 12.5% gold. Might be wrong on the math, but like a lot less. So that's why it matters less to have a gold lead later on in the game, which is why it's more important to fight that third dragon once you're only down, say, 4k instead of fighting the second dragon down 5k. I know that's a little confusing, but if you guys have questions, again, just stop me on that. If not, the next important thing that I see low-level players do. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In regards to the second dragon, yeah, like you would give it if you're behind, and then you would go top lane to get that top tower instead. In terms of like the bot lane tower, let's say it's still there, then I assume they would just go from dragon to bot and get that bot tower.
Like take your bot tower, you mean?
Yes, and then whilst we're at top lane.
Yeah, they would 100% do that, which there's a few reasons that that's okay. The first thing is you're going to be setting up about 30 seconds beforehand, again, if you're keeping this in mind. And so you're going to have the pacing advantage on that tower. So you're going to take the top tower before they take your bot tower. Now, what this does is it allows you, if you see them sticking around on bot side for a long time, to go for tier 2. So not only can you go for tier 2 because you're going to have a big wave pushing, but maybe you even end up getting the Scorpion. And that Scorpion pushes way faster than the dragon. So you also have the pushing advantage. And then lastly, you also get access to their camp. So you can invade them. And so you just use that time to be like, okay, realistically, and again, when I describe the math, this also applies here. A tower for them versus a tower for us is better for us because we're behind. And so not only is there a chance of a gold bounty being on it, which is objectively better, but again, even if there's no gold bounty, 600 gold for me plus 600 gold for them is better for me because I'm behind, and so I'm decreasing that percentage that their overall gold is above compared to us. And then again, you can get that tier 2 because you're going to have the pacing advantage, you're going to have the Scorpion, so all that type of stuff. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Cool.
Okay, yeah.
Any other questions or anything?
Yeah, please. About recalling.
Yeah.
I don't know what recall is, like the precise time when I recall. If I am recalling in the, for example, I have an item in the, of course I will recall, but other to buy it. But in other situations, when should I recall? To not just recall some main things I missed.
So the main time that you want to recall, apart from obvious timers like the having an item, the first one would be obviously if you're low health. Like if you're low health and you just have no value on the map because you're so low health, low mana, whatever, you're going to want to recall. Additionally, I would just say if you don't really have anything specific to do and you're sitting on a decent amount of gold, like let's say you're sitting on 800 to 1500 gold, you can look for a recall angle if you don't have anything else to do. And so you need to just do a few things before you recall. The main one is to push a wave first. Because again, say you recall and there's a wave right in your mid lane, or on whatever lane you're playing. Well, then you're going to lose your turret, or you're going to lose that wave because it's just going to die to the minions, or the enemy is going to push it. But let's say you just push that wave. Well, now you have time to recall, so because you don't really have anything else to do. And so that's why when I was coaching the Ezreal again, I said, you push that wave, and now what do you get to do? You can ward, you can rotate and roam, you can recall, you can pressure the enemy under turret. And so again, the game revolves around waves, and so the timing on recalling is obviously if you're full health and you have nothing to buy, you don't need to recall. But if you have a little bit of health lost and you have nothing to do and you just pushed a wave and maybe you have 500 to 1500 gold, then you can look for a recall. And also recall about 30 seconds before an objective if you have anything to buy or you're low health or whatever, because you need to make sure you're in a position to then contest that objective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, please. Sometimes we are in the mid game or something, I feel oblivion. Like I don't know what to do, where to go. I think it's chaotic.
You hit like, oblivion?
Yes. For example, you don't know where should I go? Which lane I should go. It's like everything.
Yeah. So deciding on where to go, are you talking about support specifically, or just in general?
ADC, in general or ADC?
Okay, in general or ADC. So main thing on looking where to go in like the mid game or just in general on the map. So the first obvious thing is every lane covered, right? Let's say mid and bot lane, there's someone getting the wave. You probably want to go top so you can get some amount of gold. You'd rather not share gold with your teammates. So that's going to be the first thing is like, is there something that needs to be covered? The second thing is I want you to draw an imaginary line straight through the middle of the map, right? And anytime that there is a wave on your side of the map, that's going to be way safer to farm than a wave that's on their side of the map. And so you're going to want to probably go to the lane that has a wave closer to your side of the map that's going to be safe to farm rather than a wave that's all the way up. And then the last thing that I would probably think about is where an objective is. So let's say that a Baron just spawned and you're the mid laner, you're the ADC, or you're the jungle. You need to be, or support. You need to be spending that time on the same side of that objective. So you'd probably, let's say the Baron's on the top side of the map. You're going to want to go top or mid 95% of the time, unless you see a really, really free bot lane wave, but usually top or mid. And then if you're a split pushing Baron laner, you're going to want to go on the opposite side of the objective. So then you would cover, like, say, the bot lane if the top lane was where the Baron was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Any more questions? Okay.
Continue.
Yeah, I had a question.
Go ahead.
Is it better to have a jungle for a team fight, or like a jungle who has advantage over like the enemy jungle?
What do you mean jungle for a team fight or advantage? Like I'm
Like,
a little confused.
A jungle champion like who's better at like fighting in team fights, or like a jungle like the a jungle that counter picks the enemy jungle.
Okay, so generally counterpick for jungle doesn't relate to specific jungle matchup. It could, like, it depends a lot, right? So for example, Vi counters Lee Sin. Like in that situation, sure, you can pick Vi to counter Lee Sin. You're gonna be happy with that. But generally speaking, I wouldn't base my jungle counterpick so much based on like specifically the jungle, but more so the entire team. So like, let's say they picked all AD, well then Rammus might be really good. Or let's say they pick a bunch of squishies, well then an assassin's gonna look really good. So that's gonna be nice. In terms of what's good in team fighting, well, whatever champion interacts well with the enemy team is gonna be good at team fighting. So for example, Maokai is a good team fighting tank jungle, but he's not a good team fighting tank jungle if the enemy have a bunch of tank killers. So if they had, I don't know, Vayne Lulu, and then they had some other tank killers like Camille top lane, and then, jungle was like whatever, a bunch of tank killers. So in terms of your pick, it's going to kind of just depend on how you interact with the enemy team. I would say it's nice to have a frontline or some type of engage. So if you have no frontline, no engage, it's going to be good for that. But then the last thing to mention on pick, generally speaking, is I don't really recommend picking super hard for team comp or super hard for like the best champion in the situation. If your goal is really to climb and just get good, like at the game, get better rank, whatever, I recommend choosing 2 or 3 champions and only playing those 2 or 3 junglers so that you can really be proficient on those 2 or 3, and then pick whatever looks best in the scenario specific to that game of those 2 or 3. But if you try to pick 5, 6, 7 junglers, what ends up happening is you get confused with the mechanics. You're not going to be super good on all the champions. You're not going to know all the matchups. You're not going to know all this stuff, and you're going to get really confused. So overall, generally, you're just going to counterpick based on the enemy team comp rather than specifically jungle. But I also recommend having a small champ pool. Does that make sense, or did I not really answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
if I
it
did.
makes sense.
Okay.
It makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
So someone asked, if you get your jungle invaded, do you usually also try to counter invade, or is that situational?
It's very situational, but I'm just gonna go to YouTube, quickly show you guys a video that I'm not gonna play the video, but I'm just gonna show you guys because I made a video. I actually got DM'd from someone who I've coached a few times, and they showed me, this is my channel, they showed me a gameplay, and this is what this is right here. How to play against invades and wild rifts, my video. And it's me going over a player's game where he ended up getting invaded, and then me talking about the main points of it. And then to just answer, because I know you guys aren't going to watch a 25-minute video, these are the small notes that I made for this guy. And so the first thing is starting your buff, like if you start on the red side, makes it harder to get invaded if you get invaded level 1. Because if you start red, usually the way an invade works is they're going to take your raptors, and then they're going to look for level 2 once they get it off raptors to invade your red, because you're going to be on Krugs, whatever. Basically, the point is you want to start on a buff if you can to stop the invade. It's also better for a few other reasons that I can describe later. Then second is if you do get invaded, check their level to try to count how many camps they've cleared. And so if the enemy jungle, say, is level 2 with almost level 3, like their XP is really close, and you're level 3, then you're going to know you cleared one more camp than them. So if you cleared 3 camps, you know they cleared 2. And so if they invaded you, but they've cleared 2 camps, you know that they cleared the camps that are on that side of the map that they just invaded. So say they invaded your blue, you're going to know that they probably took 2 of their camps on the red side of the map. This gives you information on where they're going to go next. Because say they just invaded you, they're probably going to go get their red side, you know, whatever camp's left, and then they're going to go blue side after. And basically why I tell you this is because having that information lets you know if you can invade them or not. So you can invade them back, as was your original question, if there's a few factors, right? The first is, are you stronger than the enemy? Because if you're stronger than the enemy early game, you're not going to be as scared to invade because you're going to, you know, probably kill them if they go on you. The second is, are your laners on the side of the map that you're invading stronger than the enemy? Because if they're stronger, they're winning lane, they're better early game, then also you can go for that invade. But let's say you're in a different scenario where you're a Nyla early game and you get invaded by a Lee Sin and the enemy mid is a Jace. You cannot invade them. I actually had this happen to me. I was playing Syndra and the enemy and Nyla invaded us when we had, I think, like a Lee Sin or something, and he lost the game off it. It was really bad. And when you're in that scenario where you're a late game champion and you get invaded, you just have to accept that you're going to be behind a little bit of gold. Because at the end of the day, that's 150 gold you lost. You don't really care. It's 150 gold, maybe 200, you know, whatever. Not a lot of gold. Just go about farming your camps that are up. And then when your camps are all gone, you know, you've cleared them all because you're going to clear them faster since one of them got taken, or maybe even 2 of them, 3 of them got taken by the enemy. What you're going to do to respond to this is just spend additional time doing something else apart from farming, because the enemy are going to be having to go back and farm all of their camps now, and they're going to be wasting a lot more time. So you can get a pacing advantage, and then quickly, you know, look for maybe an early gank, maybe look to invade their side like later on in the game, depending on how you're tracking their jungle camps. So I know this is a convoluted answer because there's a lot that goes into it, which is why I recommend that video if you want like a more detailed gameplay that kind of exemplifies it, where then I speak about these specific things. But generally speaking, don't overreact to getting invaded. If you lose a camp or 2, you're not going to lose the game. But the way you are going to lose the game is by then trying to invade the enemy and dying when you don't have those factors that we mentioned, like present. Does that make sense? Do you have more questions still about that, or?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So how do you counter a late game fed mastery?
A late game fed mastery. So
yep.
First thing is, I will say, if there is a late game champion who's fed and our team is behind, it's going to be very hard to win. This is just how Wild Rift works. Obviously, the enemy ahead is hard to win. But there's a few things. So the first thing is, he heals a lot. So if you're a tank champion, or even, well, you can be any champion, build anti-heal, right? You know, just build anti-heal on whatever champ you are to avoid initially some of that. Then if you're a tank, you could build Frozen Heart later on in the game. Keep in mind that his ultimate does remove...
ADC, for example,
yeah,
let's say...
As an ADC specifically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple things then as an ADC. So the first thing is, he has resets. So every time he gets a kill, reduces his cooldowns, and so his first ability is going to come back up. So don't walk up at him if he's about to kill one of your teammates. That's how you're going to die too, because he's going to kill you. If he gets on top of you, it's pretty much GG. Second thing is take Exhaust. Exhaust is going to make this matchup generally a lot easier. Exhaust is usually the best thing on ADC, unless they have a bunch of crowd control, then go for Cleanse. Anti-heal, like we said. And then, again, just keeping track of spells. So say he uses his first ability onto someone, and then he doesn't kill them. You have a timer to go auto-attack, because he has no like gap closer on you, and he's going to be able to take a lot of damage. And then when you see him use his second ability, which is the one where he stands still like a monk and then starts healing, don't attack him because he has damage reduction on that, and you're not going to do like almost any damage. So when he uses that ability, use that as a time to back off. So basically, I know kind of not a perfect answer, because at the end of the day, it's a Fed Master Yi late in the game. It's gonna be hard to deal with. Yeah, but you got to keep track of the resets. You got to have anti-heal, and you got to keep track of his abilities. Those are the 3 things that are going to make it possible, but it's certainly going to be really hard if he's really fed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. Any other questions?
One more. Yes, please. So, when to choose, when should I choose for the team, or when to choose to have the advantage? Like, when should I choose for a team, or when should I choose if you have advantage, and so I choose any champ? For example, we say in the team, you know?
I'm
You know what I mean?
having a hard time hearing you. Which one are you? Can you talk real quick? You're this one? Okay. Can you say it again?
Yeah.
I turned up your sound, so it's a little easier to hear you.
So the question is when to choose for the team and when to choose to have the advantage.
When to choose like a champion for the team? Or like in
Yeah.
draft?
Yep.
Okay. In draft, it's again, when we're playing solo rank, I want you pick like I'll use a personal example to explain this. So if you guys don't know, I have climbed on 5 separate accounts to Challenger when Challenger was the highest rank, playing every role. And then I've also played autofill to top 10 on the server 3 seasons in a row from last season and the 2 seasons before that. The reason I say this is because every time that I have climbed high, I have chosen 2, sometimes even just 1 champion, anywhere from 1 to 3 champions, and pretty much only played those champions, from Camille jungle when Camille jungle was broken, to Jace mid, Jace top, Renekton Fiora top lane, whatever. I always choose a few champions. I learned how to play Jace in a Malphite, which is an awful matchup. I learned how to play Camille into a bunch of bad matchups, Lee Sin, whatever. The point is, I don't give a shit about your team comp. I don't care about who counters you. I don't care about any of that. I care about you playing what you're good at, because you can learn how to defeat any of those matchups. Now, again, you should choose 2 or 3 champions generally. That way, like, you don't have to play Jace in a Malphite. You can lock in a counter to Malphite, right? So if, like, say you have 1 champion that you're really good at, but that champion gets countered really hard by tanks, well, then I recommend learning a tank counter specifically for those scenarios. But as a whole, I want you to pick selfishly, and I want you to have a very selfish mindset as a whole in solo queue, and mostly focus on being good on your champion more than focusing on picking for the team comp. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay.
Let's continue.
Yeah. For now, other things about jungle. Herald is a better objective than Dragon, and it's not even remotely close. Herald obviously ensemble right now, same thing. But the reason that it's way better is a few things. So the first thing is the Dragon buff does basically nothing. It's completely negligible in the early game, and the only value of Dragon is Soul. So your only goal is to deny 1 of 3 dragons rather than getting all 3. The reason that it doesn't really make sense to prioritize Soul is because let's say that you won 3 dragon fights and you got Soul. That's cool, now you have a really big buff, but you probably were winning that game really hard anyway because you won 3 fights in a row at 3 separate intervals in time. So you're probably just strong enough to win the game anyway, so it doesn't really matter that you have the buff in the one scenario where you're getting the strong buff, and then every other scenario where you just have 1 or 2 dragons or 0 dragons, like, it doesn't matter because it doesn't do anything as a buff. So you would prefer Herald, because Herald gives you that early gold advantage, which allows you to actually snowball the game and win the game, and then allows you to be stronger on the 2nd or 3rd dragon, which is kind of the similar thing to how we spoke about how 2nd dragon is a really good comeback timer, because people overvalue dragons. Obviously, if you have a really strong duo lane and a really weak Baron laner, like say your Baron laner is 0-4 and your Dragon laner's 3-0, you should go for Dragon just because you want to play around your strong laner. But generally speaking, if your laners are pretty equal in terms of strength, you would rather prefer Herald. And then, again, play around strong lanes. So if there's any specific questions around that, let me know. Otherwise, we're just going to move on to Baron lane. And yeah, again, just interrupt me. But or if you have questions. Going on to types of champs of Baron laners now. And I know we're going to end up not having, you know, you guys are probably going to end up leaving or not have enough time to talk about the entire slides. And so if you have questions about any part of the game, not just what I'm talking about right now, just ask them, because I know, like, you know, you guys probably have questions about a variety of things. So
yeah. So someone show your Ekko. So can you share with us some Ekko notes, por favor?
So I did not understand that. I'm sorry. What was that?
Can you show us some of your Ekko notes?
Some of my Ekko notes.
Yes.
I don't know if I have specific notes of like Ekko. Like, I've coached Ekko players, I think. Actually, I coached an Ekko player a long time ago. I can show you what the notes look like, but it was mostly macro decision. I wasn't, yeah, no, these things weren't really focused on the champion. I don't have specific notes on the champion, so I'll just tell you the main things that I've learned after playing this champion a lot recently. Yeah. So, first thing is, in terms of build, if you're playing mid lane, go for, and again, this is recorded, so you can like go back to this part of the video if you're trying to, I'll write it down somewhere. So it's easier maybe. I'll just write it down, and then you can ask me to send this to you. You can like message me or whatever. But just generally, the build is going to be fleet Now I'm just gonna write green runes, and then Gathering Storm. And then the build is just gonna be Lichbane. Autocorrect is annoying, but whatever. Lichbane, Soul Stealer, Deathcap, Brown, Infinity Orb. Obviously, there are going to be some situational things. This is generally what you're going to do for mid lane. And then for jungle, I'll just write this quick. And I know I'm kind of going to take a little bit of time. Sorry about that. But jungle build, generally Electrocute is a better rune for that. But you can go Fleet if you prefer it. Then I'll just say orange runes, which are like, you know, Precision Tree. And then Perseverance. I don't know how to spell Perseverance, but that's close enough to the spelling of it. That's probably fine. And then the build is going to be Nashers. Then same. Or I guess you guys, I'll just write it. Soul Stealer. Deathcap. Crown. Infinity Orb. Okay, so now to go on to like the gameplay notes. Main thing, I'm going to assume that you've watched or that you know how to play this champion well enough that I'm not going to go over the basics of him. Things I'm going to talk about are some like the unique things I saw that were really important. So use second ability where you think you will ult is the first thing. Because if you do this, you can second ability onto your, or you can ult onto your second ability and then you stun them and you get a bunch of damage. It's really useful. So if you're like running away from someone but your ult's up, second ability where you think they're going to end up, where you're going to ult them, that's one of the main like kind of key things. I did not mean to do that. Oops. Okay, and then are you playing him jungle or mid? Because I don't know if I should give you a jungle tip, but let me know if you know which you're playing him in. Like what rule you're asking about?
Yeah, let's go for mid.
Mid, okay. Okay, then mid, there's a really big thing. In mid, into low auto damage champs. So any AP champion for the most part, go onto the wave as soon as it reaches enemy tower and use first ability, then first ability again, then invade. And I'm actually, and this is going to be the final tip, most of the other tips are pretty straightforward. I recommend if you're trying to learn how to play a champion to just watch top players play this champion and then just copy them. Like when you're looking to play and learn champions, watch high elo players play. When you're looking to improve at the game is when you should probably try to learn things from like my videos or from other people's things. What I'm doing right now is to show you an example of what I just told you about. I believe it's this game. It is this game. And so I'm just going to show you exactly what I'm talking about and show you how well it works. And keep in mind, this is into a sovereign jungle player. It's not into some random person who has no idea what they're doing. And this is what I mean. When I'm into a weak early game champion, so I'm into Kale, your wave clear is absurd. And so I literally stand here. I first ability as soon as it gets here. It looks like it's lagging, but you understand the point. And then my first ability comes up in 5 seconds. And now I've literally cleared the entire wave at 22 seconds. And jungle camp spawn at 20 seconds. And so what I do is I immediately go and I ward his blue buff. And now I see if I can invade. Now I can invade because he's here. And then I kill him. And so we end up just getting first blood. Because in a second you're going to see we do this. And then I actually execute myself because I realized I didn't take any damage from him. And so then I execute to get a quick recall. So that's a really important cheese that you should do into bad early game champions. So just keep that in mind. But those are the two main things. Does that kind of make sense? Do you have any specific questions about Ekko that like maybe I could answer or anything? Okay. Anyone else have any? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the current moment. Thank you. Thank you very much for your explaining. It was very demure. Very.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions about anything, or otherwise we'll just go into Baron lane again.
Let's continue.
Okay. So yeah, basic types of champions in Baron lane: split pushers, bruisers, tanks, and then carry champs. And I think I'll go through this pretty quick now because it seems we've been taking a lot of time. Split pushers' main goal is to draw pressure on side lane and create kind of like, 1v1 or 1v2s. Main thing to understand, you need to split push on the opposite side of an objective. And then the main goal is to either continue on that side, split pushing, or to push that wave really quickly and then rotate. So kind of, again, in the Ezreal example, how we, showed how you should push the wave, then rotate. you're going to do the same thing when you think that you're going to be valuable in the team fight. But when you think that you're not really very helpful in the team fight, because maybe your champion's weak in the team fight, or maybe the enemy is too strong, whatever, then you're just going to stay on the side lane. But you're just going to kind of use that, pressure. The main goal of Baron lane is to draw pressure. So same thing with tanks, except their goal is just to deny the enemy laner a lead, rather than to necessarily get that lead themselves. And then you're going to want to make sure you're pushing the objective the wave about 30 seconds before the objective. That way you get to rotate to team fights, because usually tanks want a team fight. So you really want to be just pushing that wave so that the enemy can't get a lot of gold, and then using that, the fact that the wave is pushed to rotate towards objectives and whatnot. And then itemization, we went over that in jungle, but same thing for top lane. Bruisers are basically going to fulfill the split push or tank goal depending on the game. So I'm not going to, there's no specific note on those champions. Just keep in mind, if you see you have a really good side lane matchup or whatever, you might want to play the split push. And if you think your champion interacts well with the enemy in team fights, you're going to go for that. And then carries, the main goal of them is just to get gold through strong laning. The way that you're going to lane really well is typically by punishing the enemy for going for last hits. So whenever the enemy, or whenever your minion's really low health, the enemy is going to walk up to auto attack it. And so you use that time to deal a bunch of damage to the enemy. And then, continue to cycle through that. As a ranged champion, you're going to mainly focus on farming, which again is through this wave management, pushing the wave, rotating, getting another wave, going back and forth, this type of thing. And then the last thing to understand as Baron lane is jungle tracking. And so you really, especially as a carry top laner, but really as anyone, you want to keep in mind the jungle pathing. So the first thing is you need to look at your jungle. So if you start on the top side of the map and your jungler starts on the bottom side, he's going to be in a position to gank you early on in the game, because he's going to rotate towards your side of the map. Whereas let's say he started on the top side and your top side, he's going to be away from you. And so you're going to be more passive when the enemy is away from you, or when your jungle's pathing away from you. You're going to be more aggressive when he's pathing towards you. And then of course, if we push our wave and then we go and ward the enemy jungle camps, similar to how I described as warding their blue buff and then figuring out whether or not they're on the red side or the blue side, you can do a similar thing, but ward, whatever camp you can. To kind of determine these things. Again, there's specifics to it, so if you have questions on the specifics, just let me know. But those are the main things. So yeah, is there any specific questions about Baron lane, or again, just if you guys have questions about anything? I'll go through it fast, so just interrupt me as I'm talking. First important thing is understanding the boots recall. I think I kind of described this earlier. Typically, again, similar to the Ezreal, but in Baron lane, after pushing 3 waves, if you clear them perfectly, you're going to have enough to recall for boots. So this is going to give you a really big power spike, whether you're hitting plated steel caps, mercury treads, or boots of dynamism, whatever your champion builds. Typically, that's a really big advantage. So if you're able to get towards the lane, push those 3 waves, then recall, spend your gold. If the enemy get trapped in that lane because they don't recall right away and they're stuck clearing the wave, and you have that item advantage, you can just completely stomp the lane. Again, make sure you're split pushing opposite side of objective. Understand that the lane is based around pressure, so you're really just trying to draw pressure on the enemy, draw them away from what they want to do. So don't go really far up on a side lane 45 seconds before an objective, because the enemy are going to just go there and kill you. But if you go up really far and really aggressive 10 seconds before an objective spawns, the enemy are stuck choosing between pressuring you or killing you on the top side and going for that bottom lane objective. So you need to time your aggression with not only your jungle's pathing, but also with the objective spawn timers. We spoke about jungle tracking and punishing last hits. Those are the main things. So we'll just go on to mid lane. Again, stop me. I know I say this a lot. Just stop me. Yeah.
2 questions.
Yep.
When to team fight or split push, and then also when to build the HP item over AD item.
What do you mean by what item? Do you mean boots, or do you mean what?
So you can start off by
you mean Ruby Crystal or Longsword? Okay.
Yes.
So
yes,
you're gonna want to start Ruby Crystal. I'll answer this question first, and then the other one. So you're gonna start Ruby Crystal if you're a champion who prefers building tank boots. So again, most tank champions and bruisers are gonna build tank boots, and so 95% of the time you're gonna start Ruby Crystal as those champions, just because it means that you can only get 3 waves. You crash those 3 waves, you get to recall for boots, whereas you have to crash. Usually you have to get 4 waves to get your boots then if you started a longsword. And then obviously if you're a carry champion, like say a Vayne top lane, you're going to build your boots, you know, with longswords, you're going to do longsword. The only exception to this, I would say, is when you're into a mixed damage champion and you're a champion who doesn't really need their boots. So I'll give you kind of a specific example for this. I play a lot of Warwick top lane, and when I play Warwick top lane, I'll usually rush my defensive boots. So I'll build a ruby crystal first. But there's some scenarios where I'm against a champion who does kind of mixed types of damage. Like let's say Jax, right? Jax does AP and he does AD. So if I build armor boots, I'm not defending against his AP, so I'm getting less value for my boots. But if I build, MR, then I'm not defending against his autos as well. And so in that specific scenario, I'll do longsword and I'll rush my first item instead of going for boots. But most other times, I'll just, whatever boots fit my situation, I'll start whatever builds into that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing, win the split push versus win the team fight. So there's kind of this there's sort of 4 scenarios. And again, obviously game's more complicated, but to simplify it, there's kind of like you being stronger than the enemy and your teammates also being stronger than the enemy. Then there's you're stronger than the enemy, but your teammates are weaker. And then you're weaker, but your teammates are stronger, and then everyone's weaker. And so let's say that you're weaker, to start off with the situations where you're weaker. Say you're weaker and your team is weaker. Usually the way to come back in a game like that is to create advantages on the side of the map the enemy aren't playing on. So you would probably split push realistically, because the enemy, say there's an objective up, they're going to go for that objective. And so that's sort of a timer for you to create an advantage elsewhere. You know, you're just generally trying to create a numbers advantage. So let's say that you are weaker and the enemy's weaker, but the enemy top laner is split pushing, but like your turret's not super pressured. Then you'll rotate to the team fight because now it's a 5v4. So you're looking for a numbers advantage when you are all weak. Now let's say you're weak, but your teammates are strong. Now your only goal is to make your teammates' game easy. So if your teammates' game can be made easy by keeping the fed Darius away from the team fights, then just fuck with the Darius a bunch. Like if there's 5 seconds before an objective spawns and the Darius is pushing out a wave, then just go look at the Darius and just watch him. And then anytime that he tries to move, start fighting him. You don't actually care if you die or not because you're weak and there's an objective where your team is strong, they're going to win that fight. So you're just trying to keep that Darius away from popping off. But then there's another scenario where maybe you have decent CC and you know that you could provide value to your team, even though you're weak and the enemy are strong compared to you, but your teammates are strong. So now you're just going to go to a team fight, just be beefy, and then maybe try to mess with the enemy like enchanter support or mess with the enemy carry, just make their life annoying. So basically, you're just trying to find whatever way you're going to be more valuable. Again, I described some of the basic scenarios. There's obviously more. And then now going into when you're strong. So let's say you're strong and your teammates are strong. You want numbers even everywhere. So you want to be in a 1v1 and you want them to be in a 4v4, or you want to all be in a 5v5. Because if you're all on equal numbers and you're all stronger, you're probably going to win that fight, right? But let's say you're stronger and your teammates are weaker. Well, now you have to determine, am I strong enough to solo carry that fight or not? If you're strong enough to solo carry that fight, then you can rotate, right? So maybe you're a fed Darius, and Darius obviously very good at 1v9ing a fight. But let's say you're a fed Fiora, you're probably not going to 1v9 a fight most of the time unless you're really fed. So you're probably going to stay on side lane. So that's essentially how you decide. Again, there's more scenarios, but that's the basics of it. Does that make sense, or are there more questions as it relates to that?
Yes, that makes perfectly sense. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Any other questions or anything?
Yeah. You could, I guess, shortly explain if proxying is good.
If proxying is good. Okay, so usually the time that proxying is valuable is when you're trying to draw a lot of pressure, and it depends on so many things, so it's a little hard. It is valuable in certain scenarios. Typically the scenario it's most valuable in is when you fall behind early game, and so you're not going to be useful. And when you're not going to be useful, your new value just becomes getting as many waves as possible. And so the way that you do this is by pushing one wave. And if you guys don't know what proxying is, what proxying means is you push the wave that's at your lane. Then you go behind the enemy turret, and then you push that wave before it even gets to your turret. And what this does is it makes the enemy have to choose between getting the wave that's stuck on your side of the map, like on your lane, or choosing between killing you. And so this value comes usually when you're really behind, because let's say you're 0-3, you're only worth 150 gold, so you're not very valuable. And so usually when you're behind and when you just want to draw pressure on the map, you can proxy. Now, what you need to keep in mind, you shouldn't proxy right before an objective is spawning most of the time, because what this is going to do, or you could proxy right before it's spawning, but say you proxy 30 seconds before it's spawning, you might die, and then now they're all going to be just getting the objective for free. So you have to be very careful with your timing. Either only do it when there's no objective or nothing the enemy could take, or right as the objective spawning so that you try to bait the enemy into going onto you when you're weak. And then I just want to quickly mention, because that's generally just my answer on proxying, but like, it's really important to understand when you're behind that it's actually okay to die a lot for waves. So if you're already 0-3, don't try to get a bunch of kills anymore. You're 0-3, you're behind. Now your new goal is to die as much as possible for waves, because the more you die, the less gold you're worth. And now the enemy are going to waste a bunch of time trying to kill you without getting much value. And you can search through my channel. I have videos with specific game examples about how to be valuable from behind that kind of like show this type of gameplay. But did that answer your question?
Yes, that's perfect. I think we should wrap it up a bit.
Okay.
Just
Sounds good then.
because it's almost been 2 hours.
Sure.
And I hope you drank water so you're not.
I was drinking water, yeah, a little bit. My throat's pretty dry though. I was talking a lot.
Yeah, just take a few moments.
I have been recording this, so I'll upload this on YouTube on my channel. It's just called TalonWR. So you guys can watch it. I'll probably upload it tomorrow. So it'll be uploaded tomorrow, probably. Apart from that, if you guys are interested in coaching, you can just DM me. You have my Discord right here. If you want like specific coaching, I stream on Twitch as well, so you can watch gameplay of mine. Other than that, I don't have any more questions, but I'm fine with staying around longer. Like, you don't have to stay shy, or anyone leave, whatever. But if like other people want to have like a conversation, ask me specific questions, I'll stay for like another 15 or 20 minutes if there's people asking questions. Otherwise, I'll leave. So it's up to you guys, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Talon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had fun. So
yeah, so if you have any further questions, please do ask. He's here for another 15-20. And yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you coming today.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, go ask your questions, guys.
Thank you so much, Talon.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That was very informative.
I'm glad.
Thank you very much. You ate with the explanation. Oh my god, it was very. You got every like angle, and you ate. Oh my god.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will link your socials.
Okay. Someone asked if I have tips for Seraphine. I honestly don't really play Seraphine.
Wait, is it over?
Is it over?
Sorry.
If you have a question, you're free to ask a question if that's what.
No, you can answer the question that you had first.
Yeah, I mean, someone asked about Seraphine. I don't really have super specific tips about Seraphine. The main thing is patience with abilities. Like, I see a lot of people when they're playing these champions that are very focused on abilities. Like, especially I coach Varus players a lot because I've been ranked with Varus. But like, when I play these types of champs, people are really, really focused on spamming their abilities right away. So I would say you don't need to necessarily, flash ult right away or use all your spells right away. Wait for the enemy to use these key spells to engage, to kind of, as the fight develops, they're going to be less aware of the fact that you still have your ultimate up, and they're going to be more grouped and that type of thing. So I would just say patience with your spells, but that's about all. I don't have like super specific tips. And yeah, you guys can write your questions here in the thing. But that's my main answer for the question. There was someone else who had something to say, or?
Yeah, I wanted some tips on Jinx because I started playing her a lot lately, and I'd like to get better.
Okay, what are like the main types of parts of the game that you struggle with Jinx, or like any specific kind of thing about Jinx?
Early game and farming, mainly.
Early game and farming, okay. Main things for the early game is, did you watch me coach the Ezreal? I don't know if you did or not.
Yes, you said to position yourself near the jungle And
you want to
let's
be on the
support
river
you
side,
with
and you want to stay on a
the river side,
horizontal lane as well, so that you're not, you want your support on the bush side. But say that your support ends up going towards the river side because they don't know what they're doing. It's okay to be on the bush side. You just want to make sure you're spread out while still being on a horizontal line to the point that you can auto attack people at the same time. So that's the first thing, is keeping in mind your support's positioning in relation to you. And then the second thing, again, I spoke about it with the Ezreal, is understanding that wave priority, which means having the lane pushed and having more minions of theirs killed than have yours been killed, is really the most valuable thing. If you have those lanes pushed, then the enemy are going to be in a really, really bad spot. So make sure that you're trying to get pressure and push that lane to the best of your ability. Understand as well that you can be more aggressive based on your jungle's pathing. So if your jungle is pathing towards you, you can go more aggro. Whereas if they're pathing away, I would, be a bit safer. And then use the rockets as splash damage in lane. So like, try whenever the enemy walk up, try to get a little bit of poke. When they walk up, use your rockets to auto attack a minion, and then the minion will splash damage onto them. That's like a really important thing because you have really high range with that. Those are the main things for lane phase I can think of. Is there any other part of the game or other things?
The Q mainly, sometimes I'm confused when to switch. I know that one is faster than the other and one has more range than the other, but sometimes I just don't know which one would be more efficient, if it makes sense.
At the end of the day, it's going to be a rather straightforward thing. There's going to be unique scenarios where someone's going to be on top of you and there's going to be multiple people and the rockets are going to be better. But almost always the minigun, which is the short range one, is just better anytime they're in range of the minigun. If they're in range of the minigun, go to minigun. And if they're out of range, that's when you use the rockets to close that gap. So and usually as well, the important thing to mention is in team fights, you can use rockets to stack your lethal tempo. So like as the fight's starting out, just hit the front line with your rockets because it's really safe. And then once you have lethal tempo on 4 or 5 stacks, oftentimes you can start switching to your minigun and going more aggressive, like auto attacking, because now you're going to have that range increase on your minigun from the lethal tempo once you hit 6 stacks. So that's the main thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does perfectly. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, I'll see if anyone else typed questions here. Otherwise, again, you guys can just say them out loud. As a top laner, if you can invade with Riven
so
level...
it's hi, can I ask? So if Seraphine is good in mid lane or as a support?
Seraphine?
Yes.
Seraphine is pretty average in both, I would say. For mid lane, her main purpose is just like pushing the lane and then being a supportive champion later on. And support, she's just, a normal like poke enchanter, but pretty average, I would say, in both.
Okay.
Again, feel free to interrupt me if you guys have questions, but I'll just read out the ones I see otherwise. So someone asked, as a top laner, if you can invade with Riven level 3 into something like Kale. You kill jungle, but you die. Is it good? If you already pushed the wave and then you go and invade, that's fine if there's no wave coming. I wouldn't generally recommend doing this. Like, it's not something you should frequently try to do, but if you see an angle where you see them on a camp that you warded and you just push the wave, you can look for an invade and trade your life for it, but it's not something I would like frequently try to do. Yeah, those are the main things I see so far. You check my Karma build as mid and support. This one, yeah, I play Karma. I build the same thing. I would build that as well. Obviously, there's situational items, but that's fine. And rune wise, you're also, yeah, I mean, that's fine. All that's good. Yeah, if you guys have builds, that's probably a common thing that a lot of people have questions about. So,
do you play ARAM occasionally?
I play ARAM only when I want to talk to my friend and I just want to call. Okay. But like, I never play it for fun. I hate the mode. I think it's boring. So
let me see, because I wanted to. This is a weird question. Can you give us some cursed builds that work?
Cursed
like for example, yeah, for example, like AD Yumi. I'm not saying that AD Yumi works or doesn't work, but yeah, like I want some inspiration to piss off my allies.
Do you have a type of champ, like, or type of role that you want it in, or?
Not necessarily. I mean,
Okay.
it's ARAM, so.
ARAM? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about ARAM.
No.
I'm not talking about PvP. ARAM.
Is it like AP Aurelia? I think people tell me AP Aurelia is fun.
Oh.
Or
yeah.
AP
Oh.
Jax too. I mean, just anything that one-shots people.
Oh,
is
AP
fun.
Jax works. Yeah.
Yeah, AP Jax is like more normal. Like people play that, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
In
I don't
terms
play
of
her.
AP Israel works.
AP Ezreal,
Even
yeah, that
AP
is fun.
Rengar.
True.
AP
Oh yeah,
Rengar
AP
is one
Rengar.
shot.
Wait, AP
You're-
Rengar. That's
you're
definitely.
Slay.
AD Yumi also works sometimes, especially
No,
when
girl.
there's
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
especially when there's a tank. So you kind of just go with the tank, and once there are some once you get to kill some low health people.
Whatever you say.
That works.
Okay. I think in terms of rank, the one you could probably build the most, like diverse would be Varus. You can go lethality, you can go attack speed, you can go AP.
You shouldn't though.
I even
You should
saw
only ever
It's
build
pretty
someone.
one build.
versatile.
Yeah, one specific type of build, but I mean, in terms of like how you can build him,
Yeah, you
I
can
do
build a
believe.
lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't he the champ that you can probably like build the
I think
most?
Kai'Sa's slightly more. I would say Kai'Sa can build like they're basically the same. They can all build like everything, but I think Kai'Sa actually utilizes more builds better than Varus. But
No. But yeah,
okay.
let's wrap things up. There's one with one question, and then I think we can. Oh, there's two questions, and then I think we can wrap things up.
Yeah.
Or
And
then
I'm
now
also
there's
fine.
two
Like I don't know
questions.
if you want me staying in here, but I'm fine with just you don't have to stay here. Like I can just talk to them, you know, if you want. Like I'm fine with just talking for longer. If they want to ask more questions, it doesn't matter to me at all. Or if you want me to go in like another call with them, I don't really care. But I can answer these questions first, and then see. I have one question concerning a main of mine where you say Alistar has fallen off and why you play Alistar in season. I feel like he's much stronger. Yeah, I actually played like a couple hundred games of Alistar as well, and I feel similar, but the main reason is because his lane phase is just weaker than every other tank. When you go to later parts of the game, he's fine. His level 1's really weak, and he's super reliant on people being dumb enough to get killed by his Q, flash, W into turret on level 2 or 3. Otherwise, your lane phase sucks. So the main reason is lane phase. After lane phase, you're actually a really strong champion. It's just that so is Nautilus, so is Thresh, but they're better in lane. That's the main thing. How do you play as an ADC or support against Blitz? Wave management again. So notice how a lot of the things that I say get solved by the same thing, which is if you're pushing your wave, well then Blitz is screwed because now you have the level advantage. He's no longer as scary, and you're in a fine spot as well. Play around the minions to tank, so that you don't get hooked. He's definitely a scary champ to play against though. Taking cleanse as well. You can cleanse mid hook and then stop the hook from bringing you all the way. So you could also take cleanse as ADC. Don't take it as support, but you can take it as ADC. Those are the main things into him. But yeah.
I had a question about mid lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I play a lot of mages in mid lane. Like right now I mostly play it's either Lux or Syndra.
Yeah.
And then on Syndra, the build on Syndra, because the armor levels all got and the magic resist all got buffed on every champion. Is it now good to like build Riftmaker on
So
the?
first thing I'll say is, just in case you're interested, currently I'm trying to get massive versatility level 3, and you need to get 12,000 champ score on like 10 champs. And I'm playing a bunch of Syndra right now, and like if you go through my last couple live streams and some of my YouTube videos, a lot of Syndra gameplay, and so you see the build and the runes and everything there. In terms of build, I do not go Riftmaker on her very much. If you're really trying to melt tanks, Liandry's is good, but I don't really recommend building the destroy tanks because you're going to do a bunch of damage to tanks anyway. The general build I recommend: Mana Boost Rush, Infinity Orb, Soul Stealer, Death Cap, Crown, and then Horizon Focus. And then you're going to take out Horizon Focus or Crown and put that in and make that either Oceanide Trident if you need anti-shield, and make that Morello Namicon if you need anti-heal. And then in terms of runes, this rune set is so OP. I don't know why more people don't do it, but go First Strike, Sweet Tooth, Seed Jar, Transcendence, and Gathering Storm, and then you get to just print money because you get double fruit and you get the gold from the fruit. Creates at least 500 gold a game, if not more, and the first strike gold creates 500 to like. I had like 3,000 gold from first strike, like yesterday in one of my games. So that's the main thing I would say about the build.
That's really good. And how to counter build, because now I kind of just, when the enemy has like a Lux, for example, I just go Ziggs or something. But how do I actually like counter build based on the matchups?
How do you counter build?
Yeah, counter build and counter pick.
On AP champions counter build or?
Yeah.
Okay, on AP champions, there's really only 2 items that are hard counters to things. There's Oceanite Trident anytime they have a bunch of shielding, and there's Morello Namicon anytime they have a bunch of healing. That's pretty straightforward. A couple other small things. Crown is really good if the enemy have like single target dangerous spells, like let's say RE Charm, Vi Ultimate, Ashe Ultimate, right? That type of thing. And then lastly, Liandry / Riftmaker into tanks. So you asked about the Syndra Riftmaker thing. If you want to go Riftmaker 4th or 5th item when they're really, really tanky, that's totally fine. I don't have a problem with that. I don't personally do it, but it's not bad. The reason I don't do it is because you're a burst-focused champion who's focused on immediately entering combat and dealing a bunch of damage. And the way the Riftmaker passive works is you need to be in combat for a long period of time, so it's counterintuitive to the playstyle of Syndra as a champion. But those are the general counter builds are going to be Trident, Morello's, Crown, Liandry's Riftmaker into the scenarios I described. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And on Syndra, you know the rune, the Ingenious Hunter rune?
Yeah.
Is that one good when you what's the item called?
Don't go it.
No. It's bad?
It's not bad, it's not good. There's a difference, right? I wouldn't like say you're trolling, but I don't recommend it.
Your Syndra rune, is that also viable for champs like Morgana and Orianna?
100%. Yeah, it's good on basically any mage. Morgana, Orianna, all these types of mages from mid lane.
Oh, okay.
I would say Syndra uses it best, but it's still good on others, yeah.
What about Karma mid?
In terms of the efficacy or in terms of the runes?
In terms, like, would the runes also work well with Karma mid?
Yeah, they'd work pretty well, because the only thing you really need on Karma mid is Gathering Storm, because you need, your AP late game, so your damage is pretty good, because you need good wave clear. And so the runes would get you a lot of gold, but I don't think I would recommend it, because the goal of Karma mid is not to become a mega fed carry with a bunch of gold, which is what these runes allow you to do. The goal of Karma mid is to just push the wave really hard and be a super supportive champion. And the way I'm going to do this, in my opinion, is through poke runes that are going to make my lane phase stronger. So going Arcane Comet, I think, right? And then like Scorch and stuff. And I think that is going to be more effective in terms of like the goal of my champion. Whereas I would do the runes I said on scaling mages who really want to hit death cap by 3 items, or by 3rd dragon rather, because with these types of runes, yeah, cheap shot as well, like someone mentioned, but like these types of runes are really good at getting you towards death cap on 3rd drag, whereas otherwise it's a little hard to hit that timing spike. So that's why I really like it on any scaling mage like Syndra, Orianna, Morgana type of thing.
Yeah, okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just said that makes sense.
Okay, sorry. As a support, I try to follow my ADC's pace when I say they don't follow mine, but what can I do if that fails too? Do I just leave my lane? So I described roaming earlier when someone asked a question. If they're doing really bad, then yes, you're gonna want to just roam if they're like completely just screwing up your lane. And the times that you're gonna want to roam, I kind of described them all, but to sort of, in short, you want to roam if your teammate's not going to be in too much danger because of the enemy, like they're not going to put them in too much danger, and you're going to want to roam towards whoever's strongest. And you want to push the lane before you roam. That's the short answer to that.
Oh, I had a question. Is Lux good right now versus in the new patch?
I'd say she's pretty average. I mean, for me, in terms of champion strength, I think almost every champion is viable if you're good enough at it. The main strength of Lux is obviously her one-shot potential, so anytime the enemy is decently squishy, you have really good wave clear in the early game to kind of like either be able to roam really effectively. Obviously, your ultimate's nice for picking people up. I mean, overall, I would say champions like Syndra and Victor, Orianna even, are better mages right now, but she's still solid.
Okay. And in the support lane, do you play Senna? Because I need some help with builds.
I don't, and I also think she's the worst champion in all of Wild Rift. It's fine to play her if you like her, but if you're looking for builds, I just recommend, and this is usually what I do, I just look up Wild Rift, Senna, rank 1. Like anytime I don't really know exactly what people are building, I do this, and boom, we see Hell's Devil. I don't necessarily recommend him for builds, but if you want, his build's probably okay. And then you see like Broken Support, looks like he played Senna. You can check out what he's building. I think he has decent builds, but also sometimes they're a little awkward. I usually prefer looking at someone like this, where I see a random top 3 player. And I'm like, okay, this guy probably really knows his champion better than, you know, like for example, me, I play a lot of champs, but apart from, you know, the champs I play a bunch, I don't know the builds as well. So I assume this video shows the build in a second, usually what they do. And so this guy's going for some type of weird tank hybrid build, so that's awkward, but it's like it's something you could look into if you prefer the tank hybrid build. You could check that one out that I just showed there, which again, you just look up Wild Rift Center rank 1, you'll find it. And then otherwise, we see someone who's a little late, like is 3 months ago, but most of the build's going to probably be the same, and so I'm just going to check it out. See, but this is the process I go through for building as well. So if you're ever like interested in, you know, what do I look for? And so this person's rushing Mortal Reminder first and then going Cleaver. So they're kind of going for percentage-based like stuff. And then you could probably just go for a different 10 item if you don't need anti-heal. You could go for Duskblade. Probably would be the best one. But this is a very awkward champion to build compared to most. So I just recommend looking at what these one tricks are building and trying to like see. But and look through the gameplays probably too to make sure they're actually building, you know, what they say they're building. Because then if we look at it, it actually looks like they're building something different than what we saw on the screen. So it looks like they're building Iceborne first. So it looks like tank with Iceborne Rush just seems to be what these people are doing right now, which I had no idea because I don't play Senna. So I hope that kind of answered your question. I know it's not a specific build, but I recommend using YouTube.
Question.
Yeah,
it's good. It's good.
It's a simple question. What are the best junglers right now? Like currently?
Ekko is insane, and Best is solid. Zed is really good, but he's hard. I don't really recommend Zed unless you're really good at him. Vi is really, really good. You guys can mention some because I'm probably not remembering every single jungle right now. But those are those ones: Zed, Ekko, and Best of Vi. Amumu definitely. Yeah. I'd say those are 5 that are really solid.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you recommend roaming even if your ADC unfortunately very bad? You should usually roam if your ADC sucks, but you also want to try to not make it like you don't want to leave them all the time. You want to again do the things I said, like pushing the lane first, making sure they're not too much in danger. But yeah, you can leave your ADC pretty frequently if they suck. Which ADCs work best with tanks and which with mages? The best ADCs with tanks are ones that have CC to follow up. So Varus ultimate follows up, or champions that have really high burst damage to go on them when they get CC'd. So a champion like Draven works really well. So if they have CC that can combo or really high burst damage, they're probably pretty solid with tanks. Most champions work fine with tanks though, to be honest with you. And with mages, usually poke champions work well. Varus, Ezreal type of champs work really well with other poke mages. And then enchanters obviously work well with like auto attacking ADCs usually. So main thing. I think Kha'Zix is bad personally, but I've seen a Sovereign friend that I've duoed with recently that he does pop off on Kha'Zix. So I think if you're good at it, it's good, but I don't think the champion's good.
Another question, sorry.
Yeah. No, keep asking. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. So as a tank support like Alistar or Braum, should you be positioning yourself next to the ADC or in front of them?
In team fights or like when?
In lane, like in the laning phase.
So usually in lane, you're gonna initially be on the bush side of the map and taking advantage of the bush because you're going to generally want to kind of threaten the enemy, and usually you can do that by being around the bush. And then you use the fact that you have Relic Shield to kind of auto the minions and walk up for the minions when you have your Relic Shield up to get that pressure in lane and slowly push the enemy back. So generally, you're going to still be on a horizontal line with them. Now, of course, like as the lane develops, this changes, right? Because of course, initially as the Alistar, you're in the bush. But then let's say the enemy, you know, start walking forward and pressuring your teammate. Now you're going to use your abilities to go on top of that enemy who's pressuring your teammate and like protect them, whatever. So then you're going to end up in front of them after that. And then with Braum, you're generally going to be in the bush still doing the same thing that I spoke about, but you're going to be more inclined to take value of your shield. So more often with Braum, you will stand in front of your teammate, especially I would say when you're pressuring that wave. So you can kind of time your shield cooldown with the wave when you want to push the wave, and then use your shield to push the wave and in that scenario, you're going to be standing in front of your teammate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does perfectly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. It's like split into two parts, and
Yeah.
I've been keeping it for a while, so I really hope I can remember it accurately. So, how can we like turn the game around when it feels like super pressuring that we're kind of losing? We lost a few objectives. Some of our turrets are like destroyed, but the good news is none of the opponents' champs are fed. So how can we like turn the game around? That's part one. And the second part is what happens when a certain lane, the inhibitor turret is completely destroyed. The opponent's inhibitor turret, but the rest of the lanes, the turrets are still intact. And then I find like the rest of the teammates like going around the lanes to like push the lanes and destroy the turrets. So that kind of, in my opinion, wastes a lot of time to win the game, and most probably we lose that game. So how do I avoid that second like
the first thing you
situation?
said is comebacks. In terms of comebacks, I have a lot of videos. You just look at like Talon Wall Drift, how to come back, or play from behind, this type of thing. You'll find some videos. But to like answer specifically, generally speaking, it's really important to make numbers advantages when you're behind, because obviously if you're down 10,000 gold, it's hard to win a fight. But if you have 3 people and they have 2 people, well then your gold's going to be much closer, obviously. And so you use certain things as distractions. So I would say use a dragon as a distraction, go the opposite side of that dragon with your team, and then make a play on the opposite side of the map. Or use a herald or whatever as a distraction to come back. Use the fact that they're pushing a turret or over pressuring a lane to pressure the opposite side. So basically, oftentimes play around the opposite side of where the enemy are going. You got to keep in mind, there's a couple times where you can't do this. If the enemy are going to get Soul, if they're going to get Baron, or they're going to get Elder, those 3 things are too detrimental to the game's outcome to the point that you need to still try to fight those, even if you're behind. But any other time, you try to make plays on other parts of the map when the enemy are pressuring one side too heavily, if you're behind. And then, what was the second part of your question? Was if you have an inhib taken, right?
No, if one lane we're dominating one lane to the inhibitor turret, and then the rest of the lanes aren't that
so yeah,
aren't pushed as much.
if you have a lead in a certain lane, the goal of that person after taking their first turret or even the second turret is to spread that lead across the map. So it's really hard to take, you know, the last inhib and to get all that gold in that lane, but it's really easy to take the first mid lane turret or the first top lane turret, whatever. So your goal is to push that lane as always, but usually because you were winning that lane, it's already pushed. And so then you just go mid, you go top, you go somewhere else, and you just push that, and then you play around that side. So essentially you're going to start playing way more on those 2 lanes that haven't been pushed as far, because you're going to get gold from those turrets, you're going to get waves from those turrets, and that lane is going to already be pushing really far. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But practically speaking, from like games I played where that situation happened, we usually lose the game. After we're like taking the lead, we just lose the game because so much time is being wasted. And I think those other lanes have been like really hard to push for a reason. Like if we get ganked in one of the lanes and one of the like the lead champion is I don't know, fed or like overpowering or whatever. So I think that's the reason. I know
yeah, so it makes sense. So you're doing really well, your team's not doing well, and so you feel like it's hard to win because of that. So like it's kind of, you know, of course if they're really fed, it's going to be kind of hard. The main thing you have to understand, and based on kind of what I have seen from your gameplay that we watched, I would imagine that you're not respecting the fact that there's someone who's really fed and you're being maybe a bit too aggressive. So the main thing I would say is when you're really strong, or you're, one person's really strong, you got to play really like careful with your life and not be so aggressive, because you matter a lot. So like if you're really behind in gold, you don't matter that much. You can kind of be more aggressive. But if you're really ahead, then you can't be so aggressive. So you have to sort of take into account who is really strong on the enemy team. What are they going to do? Wait for them to go forward, wait for them to use their stuff, then start to go in. And I know, like, again, it's hard because you're right, practically is different than in theory. And everything I'm talking about is sort of theoretical, because I can only give you, certain rules to follow. I can't necessarily help you play out a specific situation that has all these unique factors that have come in during the game. So at the end of the day, sometimes that is going to happen, the situation you described, and there's not going to be much you can do about it. But the best way to try to do that is to spread your lead into other parts of the map, be really selfish, take as much gold as you can, push those other turrets, and then keep in mind who is really strong in the enemy team. Try to figure out, do you have a flash or an exhaust or something to respond to them when they're really fed? Be careful with your own life, and that's like the best answer I think I could give about that.
All right, got it. Thanks.
Yep.
I have a kind of a similar question, but as a support jungler, for example, Shen, when you're playing like solo queue or duo,
yeah,
and your teammates suck, they do not do anything with you, they don't know what they're doing.
yeah.
How can you win as a jungler? Like, should you focus on gold, like farming, or
How do you win as a jungle when your team sucks, basically, is the question,
basically, right? But as Shen, for example.
As Shen?
Yeah, as a jungler who can't carry by himself, if it makes sense. Like Shen, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can carry by yourself even when you are playing this type of champion. And I'm gonna just try to see if I can find really quickly, like, I don't know, carry with 3 losing lanes. I think I've made a video like this, and I'm playing on WR. Well, I don't know if it even searches up. Apparently I'm not famous enough. It's unfortunate. But let me see how to I cannot currently. I can maybe find it later. You can message me if you want me to find the specific video. The point is, I have made videos about how to play with 3 losing lanes as Vi, who similarly is not necessarily a solo carry champion. And the thing is, when you get really ahead on these types of champions, your combat power is very strong, even as Shen. Shen's actually really good in 1v1s. He's really good at skirmishes. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to farm really effectively. And then after you farm, the main thing I would say is to prioritize whoever is doing the best. So again, maybe you have 3 losing lanes, but maybe one of your lanes are losing by 200 gold and one of your lanes are 0-7, calling slurs of the rest of your team, right? Like, so don't ult the person saying slurs who's 0-7, ult the person who's like 0-1 down 200 gold. That's basically the main thing. And then you just farm really efficiently. You use your lead to try to fight and try to play around that person who seems like they have some amount of hope, who's not completely running it down. And that's basically what I would say to that.
Okay, that helps. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Last question. What do you think about support? Is it fun or boring? It's my second least favorite role. I hate ADC, but apart from ADC, support's the most boring for me. The only reason I like support is because champions like Thresh and Rakan are pretty fun. But I don't like duo lane because I don't like people. So I have to play with other people when I'm in duo lane. It's not fun. Main support, what's the best way to position myself in team? Yeah.
Please?
What's up?
Sure. I would love your insight into this matter. So I am aware that one should always have a non-give up mentality, but let's say it's super late game and your inhibitors are down. So should you like assign one person to wave clear even though they might have Baron? And should you like, let's say that a major objective is up, let's say Elder. Should you risk a 4v5 and maybe try to clutch it? Or should you just fall back and hope that they mess up somehow, or is the game lost? Let's say you're 10k gold down.
Yeah.
How would you approach such a game?
So yeah, you're 10k gold behind and you've lost 2 or 3 objectives or whatever, or 2 or 3 inhibs rather, and whatever. Very, very hard to win, obviously. So the way you're really going to win this game, the only way you're going to win this game is a team wipe, and then you win through pretty much just getting either Elder right after team wipe or straight up ending the game. So the point is, you pretty much are just clearing the waves to the point that you have enough time to take one big fight, and then you just force that one big fight in a 5v5. So usually you're not going to want a 4v5, Oftentimes, the ways you can get around this is if you have any champion with a global ult, they can clear. If you have TP, then that person can clear and join the fight. But generally speaking, you're hoping for either a random miracle objective steal, or you're just hoping that the enemy gets slightly too aggressive and you find a 5v5. But while you're waiting for those things to happen, you're pretty much just going to push out a wave as far as you can, but it's going to be extremely hard. So at the end of the day, that's the best I can give you, but you're probably going to lose. Even if you know you shouldn't give up, you have a small chance of coming back, it's going to be hard. So okay. Read the next question. Support main, what's the best way to position myself in team fights when playing against tanks? It depends on the champion you're playing, I guess. So if you let me know what champion you're talking about, I can answer that one. For now, you lose Darius as Shen by Darius as Shen. Main thing for Darius and the Shen is just using your auto attack blocking thing to keep him from getting stacks when he tries to all in you, but I don't know that matchup that well.
Okay. Is there any questions left? Otherwise, I believe we can wrap this up. It's been 2.5 hours.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean to keep you. I was just happy to answer even if you were gone, but I didn't mean to keep you too long. I apologize for that. But,
no, it's no problem for me, but it's more like it's your time.
Oh, I enjoy it. Like I literally the reason I do coaching is just because I like doing it. Like there's no other. I mean, I like making money to pay for college too, but like that's not really a big real reason for it. I mostly just enjoy talking about the game, as you guys could probably tell from the fact that I talk for 2.5 hours straight. So.
And that's why you were chosen.
Yeah. But thank you guys.
This is not a question. This is not a question. It's to say that the last question about Shen, it was my husband's, and he really liked your answer that he went right away and subscribed.
Oh, appreciate
I did
it.
too.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're gonna be watching you together.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All
yeah.
right. Well, thank you guys. I'm gonna go. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. So thank you. Recording. All right. So your rank is, you said, Emerald, right?
Platinum.
Platinum. Okay, gotcha. Trying to figure out how to full screen this. Maybe pause for 1 second. Okay, wait, I got it. We're good. You can go. First small thing, and again, we're gonna talk about a lot of small things here, and then go into the more major details. You need to start first ability on Ezreal, not second ability, and then go towards the lane first. Don't ward on level 1. The problem with warding on level 1 is then the enemy gets control over the wave, so that's kind of an issue. Then you're not going to be able to push as hard. And you don't want to be trading so much with auto attacks early game in general as well. You kind of want to, on Ezreal, push the wave first, and then after you have the wave pushed, you start trading once you get a level advantage. And also just quickly, just noting, just stop me or ask questions whenever you have specific questions. But initially, you need to start first ability, and you mainly want to focus on getting the wave, because if you kill 4 minions, the first 4 minions, you get level 2, and then usually you want to trade around that level advantage rather than auto attack trading when you're on equal footing. And also Caitlyn auto attack damage is going to be higher range than you, and more damage whenever she gets her passive, the 6th, the headshot. And so you want to keep that in mind. And then in terms of where you want to stand in the lane as an ADC, typically you want to stand more on the towards the river, and then you want to let your support take control of the bush, because then you're spread out enough where you're not getting hit by AoE or anything like that. But in this situation, since you're kind of standing close to your Janna, it's going to be easy for the enemy to poke you. And then after you push the wave under the enemy turret, you don't want to back off. You want to try to take more control over the lane and keep the lane pushing. Because as a champion like Ezreal, your goal is really to poke the enemy out. All right, we can just go from here, so it'll be a little of the same thing we just talked about. But does that make sense? The initial thing about kind of wanting to control the wave first and push the wave before you end up trading really hard. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the nice thing too about what you can do after you push the wave, in this situation right here, where you just push their wave under the turret, you want to use this time when there's no specific wave for you to hit to take advantage of various different things you can do. What you can do in a scenario after you crash the wave under the enemy tower, crashing it just means pushing it under their tower, you have a few options. The first thing is that you can go ward. So instead of warding level 1, you can ward later on, level 2 or 3. And what this does is now you create more time, where since you've already pushed the wave, you can now go ward their blue buff and find where their jungle is. Or if you just ward the river, that ward's going to stay longer because you warded later, so then it's going to give you vision for longer. So that's going to be more valuable as well. And then if you end up having a lot of gold or you're low health, after crashing the wave under the tower, you can recall instead. And then if you have none of those options, you don't need to recall, you don't need to go ward or anything like that, well, then you just get to sit and poke them under tower. So kind of like you're doing right now, this is more what you want to be doing with your time when they're under their tower, rather than kind of backing off. The only issue here is kind of using your third ability really far forward to make trades. The main thing about Ezreal to understand is like you can take advantage of pushing the lane really far forward because you have so much mobility and so many ways to escape. But when you don't really know where the enemy jungle is, you don't want to be using that third ability forward. It's more of a defensive spell for the most part, unless you see like an angle to actually fully kill the enemy. And so you just have to be very, very careful with that spell. More just play around pushing the wave, having that wave pushed, and then poking the enemy. And then because you've like kind of pushed that wave under their turret, you're usually going to have a level advantage because you've taken more minions than them. But in a situation like this, you didn't really have a level advantage, and then you still went and kind of traded pretty aggressively. And so you want to more trade around like the levels. Like even here, your support's not here, and there's a really big wave stacked up, and the enemy are level 5. So you shouldn't be trying to auto attack. So you really want to pay attention to levels as well as the wave positioning for deciding on whether or not you want to trade. Like in a situation like this, it doesn't really make sense for you to go forward. Now, luckily, because the enemy aren't very good, it kind of worked out somewhat. But the problem with trading when there's a really big wave is that wave's going to hit you as you go in, and if you die, you're going to lose this wave. Whereas, say that you die after pushing a wave, you only lose that 300 gold from you dying. You don't lose the gold of farming the minion wave. But because you died when the wave is right here, you're losing all of those minions there. Does that kind of make sense as well?
Yeah, I just don't know what does it mean to trade?
Trade just means dealing damage to the enemy at the same time that they're dealing damage to you. So basically trying to attack the enemy and deal damage to them. And continue to stop me if I use phrasing that doesn't make sense to you, to be clear. Like, don't be shy about that, because sometimes the phrasing is confusing. So just anytime you have any question, like, stop me, because the point is to give you value and, like, you know, make sure you understand what I'm talking about. So if something doesn't make sense, just stop me at any time.
All right.
But yeah, another thing is, once we're around 4 minutes and 30 seconds, our main goal becomes to push the wave really quickly so that we can go and help at the dragon, because the objective spawns at 5 minutes. And so you don't really want to ward that bush that you warded there, because you don't get much value from it. It'd be a lot more valuable to push this wave as quick as we can, again, through our first ability, through our range and everything like that, and then go and ward the dragon. So now, because you didn't ward the dragon after pushing that, all right, yeah. So I think you were about level like 6.5. It was like right before dragon, so around 5 minutes into the game it would be. Yep, right about there. All right, so yeah, main things so far, just to reiterate, like the main points, is you really need to focus as a poke champion, but in general, as most ADCs, on pushing the wave and then trading, which we said is basically just focusing on dealing damage to the opponents. So the main thing is that the game revolves around the waves. And so that wave being pushed gives you agency to do a bunch of different things. You can attack the enemy, you can attack the turret, you can go ward, you can recall for your gold, mana, health, anything. But you basically can't do these things until the wave is pushed. And so when you traded, when the wave, and again, the wave just means the minions, to be clear about the wording, when that wave gets pushed towards your turret, like really deeply, and then you start going onto the enemy, it's really dangerous because the risk reward is just really negative. Like, again, if you go and you try to kill them and you die, then you lose that entire wave, which is like 300 or 400 gold plus your death. That's like 600 gold that you're losing. And the amount of stuff that you would gain from a kill would only be 300 gold. So that's why it's like really risky to do something like that, and you wouldn't deny them as much gold because they wouldn't lose a wave because they'd already pushed their minion wave. And so we need to kind of understand that first, focusing on the waves first, because that's what really gives us access to a lot of gold. And then the nice thing as well is if you kill the wave, then you're up in levels. You don't have to worry about these waves blocking your like abilities or anything like that. And so you have just a lot more like, you know, ability to basically like trade with the enemy, win the game very easily, that type of thing. And then after the first dragon, you're going to want to push the wave again in bot side pretty quickly, especially if you've taken the turret already, and then start rotating towards the mid lane. So you want this bottom wave to be pushed. and then right after that gets pushed, you immediately go towards mid lane, and you try to get gold in mid lane. Whereas what you're doing is you're continuing to fight and fight and fight in bot lane. And when we do something like this, you kind of see how it ends up with, oh, you got one kill, then you die, a bunch of people show up. They're just like, it's a lot more messy. And we're really not focused on so many kills and all of these random things happening. Those kills will come to us naturally after we push the wave, because once we push the wave, we get time to then rotate. So it's like, you go towards, in this situation, you should go bot first because there's a bottom lane wave coming. And then right after you get that bottom lane wave, you then can come to mid and help the Ahri. And then now once that wave in mid lane's pushed, you get to go back towards the bot lane once that wave comes. And then you grab that wave. And basically the like overall general point is that your decision making is always based around the wave. So when there is a wave to get, you get the wave first and then you make a play. Whereas a lot of times you're focusing on fighting before like there's a wave or anything. And obviously like this mistake was too aggressive. I don't really recommend trying to turret dive people very often as Ezreal. Like it's very risky, and again, the reward versus the risk is just not really worth it. Because what ends up happening when you go in on a mid wave like this is you're losing all of those bottom lane minions because they're going to push under your tower, they're going to die to your tower. And so you just don't want to be making these risky plays when we have this gold to access on the map. Whereas let's say that you push the bottom lane wave, you push the mid lane wave, and then you dive them. Well, that is going to be a valuable play for you because you have nothing else to do, and you're going to then deny them from getting the wave that's under their tower. So does that kind of make sense, just how we want to shift like what we do first instead of focusing on fighting right away?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just want to make it clear, just ask questions if anything's confusing, because I know I talk fast and everything, so you can go
you're
watch
good, you're good.
the video, the recording as well. So you know, it'll be slowed down, and we'll write notes again at the end of the more like, you know, major details. And so once again, we can use wherever our minion wave is to determine where theirs is. And so because you saw that your bottom lane wave right on, you know, the bottom lane on the map is just reaching your turret, you would know that there would be another wave coming. And so what you would have preferred to do is grab that wave really quickly and then gone towards mid. So again, you see it's the same thing. You didn't get this bot lane right away. Instead, you went towards mid lane, but then you didn't get the wave in mid, and then you went bot, and now we're kind of losing out on these minions. And so that's just sort of the efficiency thing. And what that allows us to do is just to get towards our kind of main item power spikes like by the proper timers. So typically your goal is to get towards your second item by the time the second dragon spawns. And on Ezreal, you're also going to want your tier stacked up. Do you know how tier works? Like as an item or no?
Not really.
Okay.
Like sort of.
So yeah, so here I'm assuming you're building Mana and Trinity Force. Do you know if that's the typical first two items that you're going?
Yeah.
Okay. So typically with Manamune, the way it works is every time you use an ability, whenever you either have the component is called Sapphire Crystal, and then it's called Tear of the Goddess, and then eventually builds into Manamune. But once you have any of these components, every time you use an ability, you get additional mana. And then once that additional mana that you got goes up to 700, which you can see the counter in the bottom middle of your screen during the game. Once that goes to 700, it will then evolve into basically a better item once you finish your Manamune. So the point is, you want to be using your abilities a lot as soon as you get that Sapphire Crystal or any of those tier items, because what that allows you to do is eventually get towards that spike, which is the 700 mana boost. And then if you're able to do that by the second dragon, and then you're also able to hit Manamune plus Trinity Force, you're going to be really happy. And getting these waves and everything allows you to do that. Whereas if you're focused a lot more on the fights, it's going to be kind of dangerous. So again here, you went way too hard going for this bottom lane turret. Now, because we're in a lower rank, it kind of worked out. But in most scenarios, this wouldn't work out. What we would prefer to do is after we push the bottom lane wave, once again, we would be in this mid lane. Because you see how there's an entire mid lane wave right now? And having control over that right before the objective is really important. Because we would have noticed the dragon was spawning, let's say 30 seconds before dragon was spawning. We should really be focused on getting that gold in the middle, in the mid lane to the best of our ability. And then once that mid lane's pushed, it allows us to ward on the objective. So then we can rotate and get the fight over the objective. But what you guys did was you kind of went towards the fight or towards the turret on bot lane. And then the enemy could have easily just gone for the dragon because we weren't on the dragon right away. There would have been a lot of things they could have done. And then in terms of your fighting, I recommend using your third ability a lot less to go forward. For example, here you dash straight into Set. He's obviously a melee champion. If you go on top of Set as an AD carry, he's going to kill you, as we kind of saw there. And so the main thing to keep in mind when you're using your aggressive spells as any AD carry, whether it's a Kai'Sa ultimate, Ezreal third ability, Tristana second ability, any dash, right? The main thing to keep in mind is you need to know what key spells and dangerous things from the enemy are available. You need to wait until those are used. So obviously, I'm aware that, you know, not everyone's going to know how every spell works in the game, but a general rule is just let your teammates go in first, let them kind of make the engage, and then once your teammates are starting to fight, once everyone's getting a lot lower and everything, then you can use your third ability forward. But again, use third ability forward right here into the set when he has all of his abilities up, right? He's not used anything, he's not tried to fight us, that type of thing. So we just need to keep that in mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's well, I heard someone tell me that an ADC is supposed to like follow his teammates.
Yeah,
So
you're
if there's a
usually
team
trying to follow up
fight
on engages,
or
yeah.
exactly. So since the start of the game, I was sort of like following my support and the mid. I think Ari is the mid.
Yeah.
So and then I sort of like lost focus that the top lane is entirely being like there's a wave like in the top lane right now, and
yeah,
I think our top champ was getting like bullied through like the top lane.
Yeah.
So that's probably why we were able to like push the bottom lane so fast early on in the game, because all the action was happening like on the other side of the map, and I lost focus of that.
Yeah, and so
So
go ahead, sorry.
When would I like follow my teammates, and when would I like completely ignore what's happening and just like
So the first
you get
thing
what
is,
I mean, right?
and yeah, I completely understand what you mean. So there's a couple different things to talk about in regards to that question. The first is in the actual fight itself. So let's say you're fighting with your team. In these situations, you do want to follow your team. The problem is when I'm watching your gameplay is you're going in front of your team. You want there to be basically your front line. You want there to be like a gap between, you want your front line in the middle of you and the enemy, right? Whoever's most dangerous to you. But a lot of times you're going in front of your front line, and then that's putting you in a lot of danger, whereas you want to let the enemy use their abilities on your front line, and then you deal damage to them once your front line is starting to deal damage to the enemy, whereas you're going for it a bit too early. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is you're saying more like, I wanted to go push the side lane with my team because I saw them there, but then people were doing things on other parts of the map and that type of thing. And so the main way to determine whether or not you should follow your team is to go through this mental checklist in your mind of what types of things there are on the map. So the first thing is, if there's an objective up, if there's a major objective up, you should prioritize that over following your team's play on a random side of the map. The other thing is there an easy wave I can get to first? So an easy minion wave. Like, for example, in the scenario you described, or that we saw in the game, there was a mid lane wave that you could have got. And so you need to first get the wave, make sure that there's no objective up, and then you can follow your team. So in that scenario, say you pushed the mid lane first, and then you went to help your team, that would have been fine, because what would happen is now there would be pressure on the mid lane turret, because that mid lane's pushing, and the bottom lane's pushing. But when you end up not pushing the mid lane first, the enemy can respond by just pushing the mid lane, and then having one or two people respond on the bottom lane, and then you'll be screwed, basically. And again, this doesn't happen because we're in a lower rank, but in the higher ranks, this is what would happen. And that's, does that make sense? Do you have additional questions in regards to that, or?
Makes sense.
Okay, cool. Then since the replay's over, I'm going to share my screen and kind of write out some notes about that game. And so you can unshare your screen.
Horrible game.
And then after that, we'll do like have the other people ask questions and stuff. So does that sound good?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Just for my like info about the game, which okay, so sometimes the support is really good and sometimes they're not. So when should I position myself behind my support or ahead of them? And what does that depend on?
Are you asking about, and also do you see my screen real quick? I have the notes up that I'm going to write.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I can kind of write the answers to these questions. But are you talking about lane phase, out of lane, or both? Like, is there a specific part of the game you're asking this question about?
Let's start with like the beginning of the game.
Okay, so in lane, I think this is just an important thing that I'll write it down as well. In lane, you want to be on a horizontal line with your support at basically all times. Does this make sense, or do you want me to like show you kind of a visual example of it?
No, it does.
Okay, so yeah, typically you want to be on a horizontal line because this allows you to be spread apart enough where you're not going to get hit by AoE, like area of effect abilities that, you know, could hit you both at the same time. But you're also in a place where you can auto attack someone at the same time. So you want to be on that same kind of level where it's like my range is the same as my teammate. So as soon as he's auto attacking, I want to auto attack. When he's backing off, I want to back off. So you need to pay attention to your support's positioning and kind of match that, regardless of their skill level. If they're playing bad, they're playing good, it doesn't matter. You still need to kind of match the type of thing they're doing. Now, in certain scenarios, and this really occurs, you know, the more you figure out the game, the deeper you go, you're going to eventually see those certain angles where you can go forward even though your support's, you know, being a dumbass or whatever. But like, in terms of, again, since we're in a lower rank, I want to really focus on the fundamentals. And that currently just means pay attention to where your support is and then match that to the best of your ability while still making sure that you get as many last hits and gold from the wave as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any like more specific questions? Otherwise, I'll just go into some of the notes from the game.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so something that I've noticed throughout like most of my games, I feel so, how do I say that? Kind of stretched out too thin, if that makes sense. It's like I'm working too hard and I just create such little damage.
Yeah.
Or the complete opposite, that I create a lot of damage, but I can't like make the kill for whatever reason. So do you have any tips regarding that?
So the first thing is Ezreal the main champion you're playing, or are you playing a couple? Or like what
No,
ADCs?
I just started playing playing with Ezreal just recently, I think last week.
Okay, so first thing is, in terms of getting out your proper damage, Ezreal is the hardest ADC in the game. So it's very difficult for someone who's newer to the role to get acclimated to that. If you want, like if your goal is just to have fun, you like Ezreal, keep playing them. But at the end of the day, I would say focusing on a more straightforward champion initially, getting into the role would probably be better. If you focus on one or two simple champs initially and just really get good at those, because it's going to kind of streamline the process of dealing damage, whereas Ezreal's damage output is based a lot on, you know, your ability to land spells. But then like in terms of whether or not you're getting the kill even though you deal a bunch of damage, or whether or not you feel like you're just not able to get enough damage off, there's not necessarily like a specific answer I can give to that, because it's like very dependent on a lot of different factors. But it's totally okay to not be the one finishing the damage, like, or finishing the kill. The goal of an ADC at the end of the day is to get as much damage out as possible during a team fight. And oftentimes, you know, your assassin's going to be the one cleaning up the kill or getting the last hit. If you get the last hit and you get the kill, great. But your main goal is to deal as much damage, like to simplify ADC. You want to deal as much damage as possible without dying. That is the overall goal. At the end of the day, obviously, you know, it gets more complicated, but that's like the straightforward kind of thing you're focusing on. Like, does that make sense? Do you have more questions that relate to that still?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It's a fair enough answer, to be honest. Is there a way for ADC to control like the tempo of the lane? Because sometimes I'm paired with like another champion who's like taking the game on a really fast pace, and I can't keep up. And I'm more of like a chill play. So how do I gain control over my own lane in terms of like pace?
Yeah, so I'll write out this kind of answer as I'm talking about it, but basically lane is entirely based around the wave. And this is the mistake we saw you making in the game, and this I feel like would a lot of times be what happens, where your teammate might go forward really aggressive, and then you feel the need to follow up, and then you feel, you know, screwed over. Now, if you're focusing really hard on pushing the lane initially, what's going to end up happening is your teammate goes forward, but now you've pushed that wave under the enemy tower, so the enemy have to back off, because those minions are going to hit them, and then you're going to get a level advantage because you get, you know, the minions killed, so you get the level first, and then you're able to trade with the enemy. So the main way that you can feel less pressured in lane is through getting that wave pushed, because whenever the wave is pushed under your tower, well, then the enemy are poking you under the tower, you feel like you might get dove, you're really worried about, you know, a ton of different things, and it's really hard to actually focus on farming, because it's also harder to farm when your turret's, you know, dealing damage as well, because then you got to time it, all that type of thing. And so the way to make yourself feel less pressured is just to focus on kind of pushing that wave, getting that pushed, and then going for the trade. again, there is more nuance to the game, and I want to always clarify. Everything I'm telling you currently is a general rule, and then the more you learn, the more you understand, the more you can break those rules in certain scenarios. So for example, let's say that I am Vayne and Yuumi into Thresh and Draven. I'm not going to push that wave, because if I push that wave and they know what they're doing, they're going to destroy me. I won't describe specifically how they do it, because it's not necessary for this example, but like into really hard matchups, sometimes you're not going to be able to push the wave. But as a general rule, you're going to want to really focus on pushing that wave. And then to kind of like make a second point about that, focus on level advantages. And then I'll just put in parentheses, fourth minion, or not fourth minion, I messed this up. Second minion, first minion, I can't talk, it's fine. First minion of second wave will give level 2. So in the duo lane, this is how it works. In solo lanes, it's usually the fourth minion of the first wave or the third minion, depending on how much time has passed for those that play solo lanes. But this is really important to understand, regardless of what role you're playing, is that obviously if you have twice as many spells as your opponent, it's really easy to kill them. And so you got to make sure you're pushing that wave first, and then as you kill the second or the first minion of the second wave and you get level 2, then you start going more aggressive because you kind of have that advantage. So timing your aggression based on levels and based on the wave's positioning, rather than just based on whatever your random teammate who sucks at the game decides to do, is going to be more impactful. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then small thing as well, as Ezreal, start first ability, level 1. And then again, do you have any additional questions, or you want me to go through the game now at this point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And if questions come up, again, just stop me, interrupt me at any time, because again, the purpose is just to provide value to you. And so if you feel like there's something specific that you want to go over, just let me know. But anyways, so after pushing the wave, we can ward. I'll just write it this way. We can do a few things. Ward, recall, or pressure enemy under turret. So the thing is, you know, once you push this wave, which is again kind of what we described in the first couple points, now you get different options of what to do. So the first thing you can do is you can go ward. Now, when are you going to want to ward? Probably any time that you know you're not really in super big danger of getting ganked, because you don't want to walk into river when you don't know where enemy jungle is. So if you push the first wave, you're usually not going to get ganked on the second wave, because that's just how jungle works. Jungle's usually going to gank earliest on third wave unless they're doing some really dumb shit, and realistically they're not going to gank till fourth wave most of the time. And when I'm using the numbers, I just mean, you know, the fourth wave that comes, that spawns. And so most of the time you can ward after you push your first wave. Then when are we going to want to recall? Usually we're going to want to recall when we have key items or when we have low health or mana. And so key items in the early game are going to be your boots. You're typically going to want to rush boots. Ezreal is one of the few champions where you could sort of debate, but even for me, as someone who's played probably, you know, 600 Ezreal games, I will rush Glutinous Greaves every game in the early game to get that early advantage. And so if you push 3 whole waves and you get the last hits properly, you'll have a 900 gold, and that 900 gold allows you to get your Glutinous Greaves. And then the next time you would recall would probably be when you, again, have maybe 1,000 to 1,500 gold. So basically, you know, those are the times you're going to want to recall. And then when you would pressure the enemy under turret is when you know it's safe to do so, and you know that you're going to get decent value from it. So if you're into a short range champion who can't really pressure you back, or, you know, the enemy is like an enchanter who, again, can't pressure you back the same way that like a Thresh would maybe hook you under turret. So keeping in mind like the enemy champion, how dangerous it is to go forward, and also understanding what you have to respond to the enemy potentially being aggressive as you try to go under the turret. So Ezreal has his third ability, you'd have Exhaust, you'd have Flash. If you have all these things up, you can be really aggressive, poke them under a turret. But if you say you've lost your Flash in lane, you no longer have Exhaust, well then you got to play a little safer. So you're just pushing the wave more as a defensive mechanism, whereas when you have a lot of those aggressive tools up, you're using it more like, you know, aggressive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, you don't just, maybe you just understand, but I have this sometimes happen where I'm coaching people, they just say yeah every time. So just to be clear, don't be worried about asking questions if anything didn't make sense. Just want to make that clear because sometimes people are kind of worried about that. But either way, going into the next point, after First Dragon, I guess I should actually talk about warding during First Dragon. So I'll say about 30 seconds before First Dragon, you're going to want to push the wave. and ward dragon. And then push one more wave. Then go help that dragon. So usually this is going to mean like, yeah, we ward around 30 seconds before the objective spawning. And this is true for any objective even later on in the game as well. You're going to want to push your wave or push mid wave depending on where you are. After you push that wave, you go ward. Usually you're going to have to go back, clear one more wave, and then you get to go help at that objective. That's typically the sequence we go through. Again, differs, you know, slightly depending on the game, but that's the most common thing. And then after first dragon, so or after we'll just say first objective, because you know there's the herald on the other side of the map as well. We then want to start pushing our wave in our lane very quick and making more roams towards mid. Just oftentimes the main thing again is get your wave pushing past the neutral point in the lane, which basically means right the middle of the map. You know, if you cut a line directly through the middle of the map, you want your lane, your wave to be pushed deep enough where the enemy can't immediately pressure your turret and where you've killed the minions. And then once you kill those minions, you shift towards mid. Once you shift towards mid, you do the same thing in mid. You push that wave. If you can get a turret, great. If you can't, then you go right back towards bot. And you're kind of just going back and forth, getting as much gold as possible until you get towards, you know, the next objective spawn. And then that's when you're actually going to start fighting. So a lot of these pointless fights that you kind of see that you've like engaged in this game, the issue with that is that half the time you're going to win them, half the time you're going to lose them, because that's just, you know, how it works. And so you're not really creating a consistent advantage that's going to work over the long run. You're just hoping that you win the fight without really creating these small advantages. Whereas say you push the wave and then you go fight, well, now you're doing the same thing. You're still fighting. You're still doing everything you were doing, but you got 200 additional gold from that wave. And now the enemy have to go respond to that wave or else they lose gold. And so you're just creating these like small advantages rather than going for random fights initially. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. That game was completely exhausting,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah, this sounds good.
Cool. And I will say as well, when you're trying to improve on all these points, it's kind of overwhelming to try to improve on a lot of things at once. And so keep in mind, you should only really work on about 1 to 2 of these things at a time. I would say highlight before you go into, say, a day of playing or whatever, the things you want to improve on, whatever that is. And then just focus on that. Like literally the entire game, I just want you thinking about whatever it is. I don't want you thinking about anything else. I want you autopiloting every other part of your gameplay. And then once you feel like you've built that, you know, those things as habits, you then go on to the next thing. And that's how we like slowly improve. And so even though you're going to just feel small improvements initially, in the long run, that's what's going to kind of like give you a better holistic understanding of the game. And then once you've improved on all these points, you can go into my videos. I have plenty of YouTube videos, or you can, you know, watch my coachings on my YouTube channel as well, or watch other people. Royal's a good example of another YouTuber, plenty of other people. And then you find whatever it is that you didn't understand that they talk about in their videos, and then you know, make your own notes, you try to improve, and so on and so forth. So that way you don't get too overwhelmed with all these, you know, different details, and it becomes a lot more relaxing to play instead of, well, it's never really relaxing because you always have to deal with random teammates, so I guess there is that, but that's a separate thing. Anyways, going on to the next point, less aggressive with our mobility. I'm going to generalize by saying mobility. I mean the third ability with Ezreal, but if you say, again, play Kai'Sa or whatever champ, whatever dash forward you have, less aggressive with it initially, and then the way that we're going to decide when we actually use it is going to be based on keeping track of spell. So I'm just going to write keep track of key spells and dangerous opponents. And then this is a bit difficult to do as a newer player because you don't, I'm assuming you don't know how every champion works currently. Am I correct in that assumption? Or do you understand pretty well?
I'd say, well, I have like half of the champions still locked, so yeah. I guess like half, I know how half the champions work. Yeah,
so the point is, like, when you get to a higher level, you're going to be keeping track of like a specific ability. You're going to be like, oh, I know that ability is a 10-second cooldown or a 15-second cooldown. And then you're going to be like, okay, he used that spell. I have 10 seconds to be aggressive. But obviously, when you don't probably know all these things, you're not going to be able to do that as frequently. And so an easier way to kind of keep track of this is just pay attention to the enemy's positioning. When you see them going forward, dealing a bunch of damage and like starting to get low health, then you start going forward. Whereas what you're doing in a lot of these fights is going forward right away when the enemy has access to their entire kit. They have access to their ultimate, their first, third, second ability, their flash, their stasis, right? They have all these things. And so you want to wait until you see as many of those things go away as possible before engaging. And I think part of the issue is that you feel like you're not providing enough value to your team when you're doing that because you're kind of waiting back. And what I want to like say about that is you can get a lot of value as Ezreal early on through just poking. Like you have really long range with your first ability, your poke and everything like that, your ultimate as well. And so utilize the start of the fight to just try to get them chunked out, get them low. And then as the fight develops, then you start to go forward and use your auto attacks. But you don't really need to auto attack for the beginning of a fight as Ezreal. And then if you're playing other champions, like a lethal tempo champion, let's say Ashe, Kai'Sa, whatever, these champions are going to focus on auto attacking the front line to build up their stacks of their lethal tempo or whatever. And then once those stacks are built up, they go aggressive. So basically the point is, regardless of what champion you're playing, you're probably not going to go super aggressive early on. You're just going to poke or auto. And then as the fight develops, you start to use your things to go forward once other key spells are out from the opponent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I just have one question that popped in my head. Regarding Ezreal, how far do you recommend I use my ultimate? Like how far on the map should I be? Because like last game, I actually did not like hit one enemy with my ultimate.
So
with all the times that I
there's
tried.
a couple different uses.
That was, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say it was frustrating to like use my ultimate and not hit anything. So yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple different uses of your ult. The first is wave clear, and this is especially true in the early game. So if you didn't know, maybe you knew, but after you use your ultimate, if you first ability anything, like if your first ability hits a champion, minion, whatever, your ult cooldown gets reduced by about a second. And so you want to use your ult really frequently because the cooldown is really low when you spam your first ability on stuff. And so early on in the lane, what you often do once you hit your ultimate, walk into the nearest bush, throw your second ability on someone if you can, and then just ult the wave and try to hit the enemy. That way, even if you don't hit the enemy, you're at least hitting the wave. And as we spoke about in the first couple points, having that wave control is key, right? So basically you're killing two birds with one stone. You guarantee the push, and then you give yourself the chance of getting that poke on the enemy in the lane. So basically early on in the lane, you're using it pretty short range because you're hitting the people directly in your lane most of the time. The only time you're going to use it as a global ultimate, so as a global, do you know what I mean when I say global ult? It's like just long range, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a global ult, only use it if enemy is really low or to steal objective. So like, you know, if the enemy is on Baron and you're trying to steal it, or if the enemy is low enough where you think you can kill them, those are really the only two times you're probably gonna. And then I'll say, or maybe if your team is fighting far away. So like, say that your team is fighting on the other side of the map and you're like, well, I want to provide some value. I'm going to throw the ult, see if I can hit someone so that maybe someone gets lower. Those are pretty much the ult usage is like the wave clear and then try to poke someone as you use it for the wave clear. But even if you don't poke someone, the wave clear is enough value out of it because it's a low cooldown. And then as a global ult, like we said. And then like lastly, in team fights, just use it for poke. So basically, you know how I was speaking about how you want to be pretty passive in the early parts of the fight and you just want to poke out the enemy? Well, the ultimate's obviously an amazing way to do that. So early on in the fight, when you feel like you're not really being useful, just throw your ult whenever you see a couple people grouped up, get that poke on them. Just understand you're not necessarily trying to kill someone in what we would call one spell rotation, which is basically you using all of your spells, right? Like you're using your third ability, first ability, second ability. Ezreal doesn't have enough damage most of the time to kill someone with that. And so the way you go around that is you poke people initially, and then once they're within kill range from one spell rotation, then you go forward. So does that ult usage stuff all make sense, or is there still more questions about that?
Yes, it makes perfect sense.
Okay, cool.
So overall, you don't recommend that I use Ezreal's ult from like a really long range?
Again, not unless we're in these specific scenarios that we described, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
then going on to an additional point is just keep your front line in front of you, or I'll just say in between you and dangerous enemies. I'll just say in danger. That works because I can't spell apparently. And then as fight develops, can start to go more forward. To go forward more. But like again, we kind of spoke about this already, so I'm just writing this down so it's in writing. And then as I'm thinking about the rest of the game, I think these are like the main points. I think the main thing that you should really focus on initially is getting your gold up through understanding this wave stuff that we said, controlling the wave in the early game, staying on that horizontal line with your support. And then the second thing is that a little bit less aggression early on until the wave is pushed, we have the level advantages, until, you know, the enemy spells are out, that type of thing. I would say those are the main issues I saw in your gameplay so far. But yeah, are there any additional questions? If not, like these are the main notes I would say that you should focus on.
They look great, honestly. I don't feel like I have any more questions.
Cool. Then I'll send these. I don't know if there's a channel I should put these in. But otherwise you can DM me later and I'll message you like the notes so you have them in writing. But yeah, then that should probably be it for this coaching, I'd imagine.